Chapter 401. Li Tianlan came to Green Mountain as fast as he could. It was Dong Qingwudi who called him. Minister Fang Wenxi had submitted the list of the Snowdance Corps to the army headquarters in Kunlun City. Dong Qingwudi held another meeting in the army headquarters building. The army of Zhongzhou State and Kunlun City passed the list, reported it to the office of the president and the cabinet, and then conveyed it to the decision-making committee, and then immediately issued a transfer order. In addition to informing Li Tianlan of the results of the meeting on the phone, Dong Qingwudi also told Li Tianlan a piece of unexpected news. Li Honghe arrived in Yuzhou and was now living in the Bai family's manor. The hidden dragon sea was not far from Green Mountain. In less than 40 minutes, Li Tianlan's Audi had reached Green Mountain and slowly drove into the Bai family's manor. Dong Qingrushi had arrived in Yuzhou from Huading and was waiting in front of the main villa. Seeing Li Tianlan get out of the car, she gently jumped down the steps and almost jumped into Li Tianlan's arms. Li Tianlan reached out to hold her and said, "Why are you so happy?" "I heard that you're a marshal." "Of course, I'm happy," Dong Qingrushi said softly. Dong Qingrushi said softly. She was wearing a long red dress, and her black hair was dancing in the wind. The red dress set off her skin, which was extremely white and delicate. She looked pure and charming. "I'm going to Eastern Europe with you," Dong Qingrushi said and reached out to gently touch the military rank on Li Tianlan's shoulder. Her eyes were clear and serious. "It looks better than Dad's." Li Tianlan smiled. The military ranks of Zhongzhou State were the same as those of the Special Warfare System. Only the title of Marshal was slightly different. It was also an olive branch with 3 gold stars, but there was a delicate golden shield behind the gold star on the epaulette of the military marshal. The title of Marshal in the Special Warfare System was a golden sword in front of the gold star. "How's Huading?" Li Tianlan walked up the steps and asked casually. "It's fine." Dong Qingrushi thought for a moment. The maneuver these 2 days is also very interesting. But there are fewer people going to see it. Li Tianlan said, The final maneuver had a result on the first day. The result had already appeared, so the process was naturally not worth looking forward to. Although the final maneuver was still going on, it had now lost its original meaning. So the headmasters of the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy were not in Huading at this time. Instead, they came to Tongming Temple in the West Mountain of Yuzhou to train the officers of the Snowdance Corps. Dong Qingrushi naturally put her small hand in Li Tianlan's. The two entered the villa. In the living room, Li Honghe and Bai Zhanfang were playing chess. Neither of them had any desire to win or lose. Their moves were casual, and many times, in the eyes of an outsider, their moves were meaningless. Dong Qingwudi sat aside and looked at the chessboard in boredom. When he saw Li Tianlan and Dong Qingrushi coming in, he smiled and waved at them. Li Tianlan came over and called him Grandpa. He glanced at Bai Zhanfang. Before he could speak, Li Honghe said without looking up, "Zhanfang is my old friend for many years, just like cold light. You should call him Grandpa too." Li Tianlan paused for a moment, then calmly called him Grandpa with a smile. Bai Zhanfang looked up at him with a smile, patted the sofa beside him and said, "Sit down." Li Tianlan nodded and took Dong Qingrushi to sit next to Dong Qingwudi. "Xishan is quite far from here. How did we get here so quickly?" Dong Qingwudi looked at the chessboard and laughed casually. "I had a talk with the president before I came out of the hidden dragon sea. It's not far from here." Li Tianlan said quietly. In his sight, Bai Zhanfang seemed to be dim-sighted because of old age. A cannon shot hit one of Li Honghe's pawns through Li Honghe's chess pieces. Li Honghe didn't say it out loud, but the other pawn moved forward 2 squares at a time without batting an eyelid. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. "Hidden Dragon Sea?" Dong Qingwudi raised his eyebrows. Li Honghe and Bai Zhanfang also turned their eyes to Li Tianlan. "Well, the Snowdance Corps was established, and I also found a powerful bodyguard. But the identity of the best candidate in my mind is a little special, so I specially talked to the president." Li Tianlan said. Li Honghe calmly messed up the chessboard, which was already at a disadvantage. He narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "Who is the best candidate in your mind?" "Of course it's Master Hua." Li Tianlan laughed and said, No one is more suitable than him. Li Honghe's eyes relaxed. He nodded and sighed. I came here to talk to you about this. Ji Hua was implicated by the Li family back then. Otherwise, with his talent, he should have entered the invincible realm long ago. After so many years, there has been no chance before. Now that there is a chance, I have to get him out of the desert. Ji Hua was the name of fireman. His surname was Wu. It was obviously a very familiar name not only for the Li family but also for the Dongqing clan. Dongqing Wudi was stunned and whispered, he is really a good candidate, but his age is not a problem. Li Tianlan whispered, with fire. In my current state, no one in the Snowdance Corps is his opponent except me. Fireman's realm was in the fire-flaming realm. But like Tribulation 3 years ago, he broke one limit after another in the fire-flaming realm and finally stepped into a different path. In fact, it was impossible to tell whether such a person was still in the fire-flaming realm or not. But one thing Li Tianlan could be sure of was that when he fought with Fireman in the desert prison to verify his strength, Fireman did not really use his full strength. What he exerted was the real strength of the fulfillment of the fire-flaming realm, not the strength after he broke through the limit of the fire-flaming realm. In that state, Fireman still forced Li Tianlan to break through into the thunder-shocking realm, so that he had the first time to recultivate martial arts. How strong was a fireman who could exert his full strength? In Li Tianlan's view, in this state, even if Fireman had no hope of entering the invincible realm in this life, and his state would decline with age, the strength he could exert would hardly be worse than that of Tribulation 3 years ago. Such a person was not only an absolute expert in the 4 realms of martial arts, but also could play a very important role in the battlefield of the invincible realm. What did the president say? Li Honghe asked aloud. He agreed. Li Tianlan's tone was calm. The atmosphere in the living room froze for a moment. Li Honghe, Bai Zhanfang, and Dongqing Wudi looked at each other. Li Honghe's eyes relaxed slightly. Bai Zhanfang's eyes were full of smiles. Dongqing Wudi's eyes were full of relief. Without any of them knowing, Li Tianlan went to the Hidden Dragon Sea. This matter could be said to be very small, but it could also be said to be very important. Such a Li Tianlan was what they wanted to see. The Li family, the Dongqing clan, the Bai family, and even the entire giant group put their future on Li Tianlan. Under the great responsibility, each of them was eager to see Li Tianlan's future. Not only his martial arts, but also his ability to deal with things. It was hard to say how Li Tianlan's ability was now, but at least today, he let everyone see his autonomy. It had only been a few days since he became the marshal of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. But he had been actively adapting to the change of his identity. Today, he went to the Hidden Dragon Sea not as a young man, but as a marshal of Zhongzhou State. The fact that he could adapt to his identity in a short time sounded simple, but how could it be so easy? Li Tianlan was also not used to it now. But he was trying very hard to adapt to his new identity and status, and was doing the behavior that was in line with his identity and status. He was the future core of the giant group, the future of the giant group. And the future leader that the giant group wanted should have his own ideas, his own plans, his own thoughts, his own actions, and his own schemes. Tonight was just the first step for Li Tianlan. And it was a perfect first step. Li Huaqing agreed to Li Tianlan's request, which also showed that Li Huaqing recognized Li Tianlan's current identity and behavior. Very good, the president is still very supportive of the Snowdance Corps. Tianlan, if you need anything in the future, you should communicate with the president in time. As an ally, he always has to bear some of his own obligations. Dongqing Wudi chuckled, took out a cigarette, and handed it to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan nodded, took the cigarette, and lit it. What are you talking about? A soft voice suddenly sounded. In the sound of soft footsteps, Bai Qingqian came over with a plate of fruit and put it on the tea table. Dongqing Rushi stood up and called her in a crisp voice. Bai Qingqian smiled and touched Dongqing Rushi's head, but she looked at Li Tianlan. Although she was at home, this extraordinary woman, who was very famous in the political circle of Zhongzhou State, was also dressed in formal clothes. She was charming, and her whole body was full of an indescribable grace and elegance. Li Tianlan stood up subconsciously. He, who was calm just now, instinctively reached out and scratched his head, looking a little silly. Dongqing Rushi laughed out loud. But except for her, everyone, including Li Honghe, had a complicated look in their eyes. Eat more fruit and smoke less. It's bad for your health. Bai Qingqian looked at Li Tianlan, and her voice was soft and gentle. Li Tianlan said yes, but he didn't know what to say. This was the second time he saw Bai Qingqian. But just like the first time he saw her, it was hard for Li Tianlan to describe his feelings. His perception, which was almost close to the peak of the invincible realm, was completely confused under her eyes. This feeling was not panic, but an instinctive but somewhat inexplicable feeling of wanting to be close to her. This feeling might come from her eyes, or it might be something else. Li Tianlan couldn't tell. He just felt that this feeling was very strange, so it made him very uncomfortable. This military uniform suits you very well, Bai Qingqian said softly. She was very close to Dongqing Rushi, and Dongqing Rushi was very close to Li Tianlan. So he couldn't help but feel natural. Bai Qingqian raised her hand and touched Li Tianlan's head. She said softly, "How do you feel now that you're a marshal? Are you tired?" Li Tianlan's body was completely stiff. Bai Qingqian's hand was very gentle. But Li Tianlan's body was as stiff as a stone. "I'm fine." His voice seemed to be a little frozen, so it sounded a little strange. Bai Qingqian's eyes shook violently. She took a step forward subconsciously, and then she seemed to realize something, so she put down her palm. "Don't be too stressed." She smiled and seemed to want to say something, but when the words were on the tip of her tongue, she said, "You guys talk first." It seemed that there were thousands of words that she didn't know where to start. Finally, they were all hidden in her eyes. Bai Qingqian gently turned and went upstairs. Li Tianlan sat down again. Bai Qingqian stood in front of the railing on the second floor and stared at the hall. Li Tianlan, who had already sat down, raised his head subconsciously. The two of them looked at each other for a moment, and Bai Qingqian had already turned and entered the room. She wore a formal suit at home because she was about to leave and return to Guangdong. On the first day Li Tianlan came to Yuzhou, she had already put down a lot of official business in Guangdong and returned to Yuzhou. She wanted to see Li Tianlan, but she didn't want to disturb him. Until now. She waited for Li Tianlan's arrival. But she just took a look at him. Just to take a look at him. Compared to the thousands of kilometers she would have to travel back, this look was too short. The living room returned to silence again. Dongqing Rushi cut a piece of orange for Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan took it and ate it. The orange was very sweet. Dongqing Rushi reached out to take the apple again. "Let's go to the study," Bai Zhanfang suddenly said, breaking the weird silence in the living room. Dongqing Wudi patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder, stood up, and looked at Li Honghe. Li Honghe had been staying in Yuzhou in recent days. Now that the list of the Snowdance Corps was officially determined, Bai Zhanfang and Dongqing Wudi certainly had to discuss the action in Eastern Europe with Li Honghe. The Li family had collapsed for many years. But Li Honghe still had a backup plan. In this situation, it was time for Li Honghe to show some of his backup plans. Even if he had said that he would not be the protagonist in the chaos in Eastern Europe, even if he was not the protagonist, he would play a very important role. "Let's go." Li Honghe stood up. A cell phone suddenly rang. It was not a phone call but a text message. Li Honghe frowned, took out his cell phone and glanced at it. His body suddenly stiffened for a moment, and a pair of turbid eyes quietly looked at the cell phone screen. "Senior Li?" Dongqing Wudi shouted with some confusion. Li Honghe did not respond. After a long time, he slowly put away the cell phone in his hand and looked at Li Tianlan, Dongqing Wudi, and Bai Zhanfang. He suddenly laughed. "I can't go to the study with you." He smiled softly, but his tone became calm, firm, and irresistible. "I want to go back to Linen. Right away." "Wudi, arrange a private plane." "What's the matter?" Li Tianlan asked with a frown. "It's okay." Li Honghe looked at his grandson with soft eyes. "It's a good thing. I just suddenly remembered that my existence is still very meaningful." His existence was meaningful. But Li Honghe also knew that it was meaningless for him to be here. Li Honghe did leave a lot of things in Zhongzhou state. These things could still play an important role today. But before he used those chess pieces, the woman named Qin Weibai directly overturned the chessboard in his hand. So the chess pieces in his hand began to overlap with the chess pieces in her hand. In such a situation, Li Honghe could still play a role. But his role was no longer crucial. For him, an unimportant role was equivalent to no role. If it was not useful, it was meaningless. It was not until he received this text message that he realized that even if Qin Weibai controlled most of the chess pieces he had prepared, there were still some things that she could not control at all. Ironically, until today, Li Honghe did not know if he could control these things. But he would do his best. So he wanted to go back. Go back right away. Genius 1 second to remember the address of this website. Mobile version. Chapter 402. Bai Zhanfang personally saw Li Honghe out of the villa. The Bai family's manor was huge. The helicopter arranged by Dongqing Wudi had stopped on the lawn in front of the villa when they walked out. The helicopter flew straight to the airport. During this time, the airport would temporarily open a military route. In about 2 hours, Li Honghe would arrive in Lin. In addition to Li Honghe, there was another passenger on the helicopter, Bai Qingqian. She also had to go to the airport and fly directly to Kanto. The two of them happened to have a smooth journey, so they traveled together. No one knew what was written in the text message that Li Honghe received, but everyone could feel the anxiety and graveness in his eyes, as well as the unconcealable thoughts and doubts. In Li Tianlan's memory, he seemed to have never seen Li Honghe in this state. He was sure that something had happened, but he wasn't sure what. Everything in Lin and was stable at present. Although Lonely Mountain had disappeared, the Ministry of Supervision had begun to rebuild on the ruins of Lonely Mountain. Li Tianlan really couldn't think of anything that would happen in Lin, and that required Li Honghe to rush back immediately. "Grandpa, I'll go with you," Li Tianlan said calmly. It was not a question, but a statement. On Lonely Mountain more than half a month ago, Li Honghe took Wang Tianzong's sword. No one in the entire Dark World could escape unscathed from the Sword Emperor's peak sword intent. Li Honghe had also been beaten down to the invincible realm and was seriously injured. Today, it could be said that there were no invincible realm experts in the Li family. Only Li Tianlan, an invincible realm expert, could support them. If something really happened, he had to go back. "You stay." Li Honghe glanced at him. His tone was calm and indifferent. Li Tianlan became more and more puzzled. He looked at Li Honghe and said nothing. "Actually, it's nothing serious." Li Honghe was silent for a while and smiled. "I'm just a little sensitive." His eyes fell on Bai Zhanfang and Dongqing Wudi, and he said calmly, "I know what you mean. The chaos in Eastern Europe this time was beyond my expectations, but it was in someone's plan. In the long run, it was like a game of chess with many parties. No matter how the chess game developed, it would eventually usher in a new era. I have chess pieces in my hands, but I don't have the qualifications to sit in front of the chessboard and play. At most, I can only play a small role. But if this chess piece falls into someone else's hands, it might be even more useful. So there's no point in me staying here." "Then why are you in such a hurry to return?" Bai Zhanfang looked at Li Honghe, and his tone was unusually calm. Dongqing Wudi heard something else and asked. Li Tianlan also heard something else from this calmness. He turned to look at Bai Zhanfang. Bai Zhanfang was looking at Li Honghe. He looked relaxed and even had a smile on his face. The oldest member of the decision-making committee in Zhongzhou State was not outstanding in appearance. He had dark skin and an ordinary face. As he grew older, there were more wrinkles on his face. His body was a little stooped, and he looked like an old farmer who had spent his whole life facing the yellow soil. When he smiled, he looked very honest and gentle. But at this moment, his eyes were clear, and there was an indescribable vigilance in them. Li Tianlan frowned. "Because someone has arrived in Linen." Li Honghe chuckled and said, "I'm no longer qualified to participate in the chess game in Eastern Europe. When I go back, I want to meet someone who is truly qualified to play chess." The general situation in Eastern Europe was chaotic, and the chess game was naturally chaotic. Multi-party Go. If this was a game of chess, who would be qualified to sit in front of the chessboard and play? Wang Tianzong, the Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State, was qualified. The dominators of the superpowers in the Dark World were qualified to do so. The person in charge of the special warfare systems of the major countries was qualified to do so. In the eyes of the outside world, the Samsara Palace and Qin Weibai, who were still a powerful force despite the destruction of the headquarters and the death of the palace master, were qualified to do so. The Polar Ground Alliance had fallen apart, but this superpower that was spread all over Eastern Europe was the main chessboard of Eastern Europe, so the missing former leader of the Polar Ground Alliance, Tyrant, was also qualified. With the support of the giant group and the academics, Li Tianlan, who was about to lead the Snowdance Corps into Eastern Europe on behalf of Zhongzhou State, was barely qualified to play chess. Since Li Tianlan was here, who else had come to Lin? Li Honghe saw the vigilance in Bai Zhanfang's eyes. He smiled and patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder. The old man's palm was very heavy, carrying all of his hope and strength. "This is my grandson." Li Honghe chuckled. "In any case, old Bai, I won't hurt my grandson, will I? I'm ashamed of many people in my life, but I have a clear conscience about Zhongzhou State and the overall situation. In terms of inheritance, my biggest failure in my 80s is to cultivate a son with great ambition. The most successful thing is to cultivate a grandson who can bring me strong hope. I don't have much time left. Naturally, all my hopes can only be placed on him." Bai Zhanfang's eyes flashed. He looked at Li Honghe thoughtfully. Dong Qingwudi was also thoughtful. "Let's go," Li Honghe said, and his palm still fell on Li Tianlan's shoulder. Li Tianlan followed Li Honghe in silence and sent him to the plain. "Do you remember what I said when I taught you to play chess for the first time?" Li Honghe looked at Li Tianlan and asked with a smile. Li Tianlan's eyes were in a trance, and his thoughts returned to the past that he didn't want to recall but would never forget. In the camp surrounded by the primeval forest, his life from childhood to adulthood was extremely boring but extremely rich. From morning to dusk, from spring and autumn to winter and summer, day and night alternated, and the seasons changed. His life was always disgusting food, martial arts and meditation day and night, repeated practice of calligraphy and chessboard, forbearance in the face of the Li family's many tombstones, doubt at the star-spangled flag in the camp, desire for the future, and thoughts and wild thoughts about the Li family's glorious past and shabby present situation. Perhaps at that time, all of this was still very vague or distant. It was not until Li Tianlan went to Huading, stepped into Heaven Capital, went to Lin, and traveled tens of thousands of kilometers for 3 years. Now he came to Yuzhou that he really realized what he was shouldering. "I remember." He nodded and said quietly, "A chess game is a mess. A chess game is a mess." This was the first sentence that Li Honghe said to him when he taught him to play chess. "Yes," Li Honghe said, "the chessboard is very clear, and so are the chess pieces. For Go, the most peaceful game is before a chess piece is played. Once a chess piece is played, even if there is only one piece, it will be a mess. For chess, chariots, horses, cannons, soldiers, fortune-tellers, and generals, no matter which one moves first, it will also be the beginning of a mess. Once a chess piece moves, it means that the situation begins to get out of control. How can anyone really control everything? In the final analysis, Chinese chess and Go are games between two people. But the real general trend is often a multi-party game. You can't grasp people's hearts, so naturally, you can't grasp the general trend." Li Honghe looked at Li Tianlan softly and said calmly, "But you can at least control the chess pieces in your hands." So, he patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder again. "There are many things, don't be anxious. The more chaotic the situation is, the more you can't be anxious, especially when your strength is at a disadvantage. On the road of martial arts, you should move forward bravely and never retreat. But in the general trend, it is wisdom to be able to endure and retreat. You have done this very well before." Li Tianlan thought about it. "I don't seem to have done anything before?" he said. "That's the best." Li Honghe laughed and said, "Doing nothing is like sitting on a chessboard, but you don't move a single piece. I'm proficient in Chinese chess. In a game of Chinese chess, you're the strongest not when you've taken down the opponent's chess pieces, nor when you're in a checkmate. You're the strongest when you've arranged your chess pieces but haven't moved yet. You had potential before, but your strength, power, and resources were not enough. The Wang family of Beihai, Kunlun City, and the Prince Group were all eyeing you covetously. What could you do? In terms of scheming, wisdom, and shrewdness, both Wang Tianzong and Gu Xingyun are far better than you. In this state, what you do will really disappoint me. If you do nothing, it means that you have no flaws. If you have no flaws, others will have to break the rules if they want to move against you. Li Honghe's tone was still calm. Perhaps he knew what Li Tianlan was going to face next, so he talked a lot. You have power in your hands now. In the chess game in Eastern Europe, you are barely qualified to play chess. But I still hope that you can be steady, don't be impatient, and don't act rashly. Sometimes, even if you have a chance, don't make a decision easily. The chaos in Eastern Europe is very delicate. As far as we are concerned, we can't make even a little mistake. Do you understand? Li Tianlan said, silently. That's it. Li Honghe said in a flat tone, remember, it's a taboo to seek victory on the chessboard with multiple parties. Striving not to lose is the most correct way. This is especially true on a chessboard that is destined to have no victor. Li Tianlan turned his head and looked at Li Honghe quietly. After a while, he whispered, Grandpa, do you think that there will be no winner in the chaos in Eastern Europe? Since it's a chaos, how can there be a winner? The winner is the one who sticks to the end and remains undefeated. Li Honghe's voice was low. He looked up at the sky. The air in Green Mountain was fresh. The manor was lit up. The soft light didn't cover the stars in the sky. The starlight sprinkled down, as bright and cold as the moonlight. This is not your time, Li Honghe suddenly said. No one knew whether his voice was low or helpless, but it sounded extremely heavy. It's not the Li family's time either. Just do your best in the chaos in Eastern Europe. You can do something, but don't try to change the general trend. No matter who wins or loses in the chaos in Eastern Europe, it will be a new era. It's your era. He walked into the helicopter silently. The helicopter's rotors began to whistle in the night. The signal light was on. The fuselage began to take off. The huge airflow blew the surrounding lawn into a clear wave shape, which continued to spread around. Li Tianlan remained motionless in the fierce wind, just squinting and looking up at the sky. The helicopter gradually went away in the air and eventually disappeared. Bai Zhanfang and Dongqing Wudi came over. Li Tianlan glanced at them. Just walk around. Dongqing Wudi said. The manor was very large. There was no difference between talking in the secret room of the study and walking around and chatting outside. Li Tianlan nodded and walked behind Bai Zhanfang and Dongqing Wudi, not speaking for a while. Where are the high-level members of the Snowdance Corps now? Dongqing Wudi suddenly broke the silence and asked. The Snowdance Corps was the best lineup of the Dongqing clan, Sai City, Jade Pool, and Mount Shu, but a considerable number of important personnel were contacted by Li Tianlan himself. Even the cornerstone of the Snowdance Corps, the more than 15,000 ordinary elite soldiers, were confirmed by Li Tianlan. Both the Dongqing clan and Sai City gave Li Tianlan the greatest autonomy, intentionally or unintentionally. As for Dongqing Wudi, he could only grasp the movements of Jade Pool. The Sword Justice of Jade Pool and First Elder were still in Jade Pool. But the two Sword Masters of Mount Shu, Dongqing Wudi did not pay attention to Cool Breeze, Drifting Cloud, Deep Dream, and others in Sai City. Everyone is in Yuzhou now. Li Tianlan said, just waiting for the transfer order. Before the transfer order was issued, it was obviously against the rules for these experts to appear in Yuzhou. However, the establishment of a special warfare battalion and the list fully respected the will of the new commander, which was not in line with the rules. Dongqing Wudi nodded and silently thought about the list of the Snowdance Corps. Ling Shuangxue, the First Elder of Jade Pool, and Su Chang'e, the Sword Justice of Jade Pool. The two represented the power of Jade Pool. About 60 swordsmen of Jade Pool joined the Snowdance Corps with them, including Dongqing Rushi, who had entered the Thundershocking realm, by Yuming of the Bai family, and Su Chu, the first disciple of Jade Pool, who would set off immediately after his injury, was slightly better. Yun Qinshi, the Phantom Sword Master of Mount Shu, and Han Chongyang, the Yin and Yang Sword Master, also joined the Snowdance Corps with about 100 swordsmen. Although Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud of Sai City had not reached the half-step invincible realm in terms of realm, both of them were top assassins. On some occasions, they played a much more important role than the masters of the half-step invincible realm. Led by the two of them, the assassin team formed by Deep Dream and Du Hanin would become a sharp sword of the Snowdance Corps. The strength of the Shadow Sect was slightly weaker, but Hua Qingfeng's strength was there. With him as the leader, it was also a force that could not be ignored. As for the Border Control Corps, the 4 major generals who led the 40,000 troops to the Sky Academy all joined the Snowdance Corps, which was also a combat capability that could not be ignored. Among them, Li Zhonghu was not far from the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. In addition, Fireman, the first person in the fire-flaming realm in recent decades, was Fireman. There was also Li Tianlun, who had the combat capability of the invincible realm. In the Snowdance Corps of 20,000 people, more than 3/4 of the soldiers were in the same boat. In addition to the Snowdance Corps, there were Tribulation, Siditang Yue, Qin Weibai, and Cheng Huining, the new commander of the Arctic Ocean Command in Zhongzhou State. This list of names was absolutely luxurious. As everyone thought, it was really a good hand. But Li Tianlan, who held such a good hand, needed to face a situation that was equally complicated, and the enemy he faced was more powerful. Dongqing Wudi hesitated and finally couldn't help asking, "Tianlan, do you have any plans for Eastern Europe?" "Not yet." Li Tianlan thought of what his grandfather had just said and slowly shook his head. "Let's take one step at a time, but we can't let go of Knights Templars and the Jiang family of South America. They must give Zhongzhou State an explanation. It just so happens that I have an old score with the Jiang family of South America. If there is a chance, I will naturally settle it." More than 3 years ago, he had vowed in Heaven Capital to destroy the Jiang family of South America in this life. Li Tianlan had never forgotten what had happened on that day. "It's right to target the Jiang family of South America and Knights Templars." Dongqing Wudi nodded. It was these two forces that caused the garrison of Zhongzhou State in to suffer heavy losses when they besieged the Samsara Palace. For Li Tianlan, whether they besieged the Samsara Palace or attacked the garrison, they were all reasons for Li Tianlan to target them. "I'll give you a hint," Dongqing Wudi said slowly. "This time, Zhongzhou State is not only sending the Snowdance Corps to Eastern Europe, but also some free forces that Zhongzhou State can't fully control. The two highnesses of Sai City, Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong, and even Kunlun City will send similar candidates to Eastern Europe. No matter what they pursue, once they succeed, it will be beneficial to Zhongzhou State as a whole. So in the face of enemies outside Zhongzhou State, we don't lack top combat effectiveness. The other force is a neutral force. The terracotta army you saw in Heaven Capital is almost all dispatched. The 4 spirit generals are now in Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe is very big, so this time the strength mobilized by Zhongzhou State is far greater than that of the decisive battle of Heaven Capital. As for the Snowdance Corps, as long as you let the Jiang family of South America and Knights Templars pay the price, and unite with the Arctic Ocean Command to exert pressure on Eastern European countries and expand the size of the garrison of Zhongzhou State, the Snowdance Corps will have completed its task. Its performance will be considered as a pass. Tianlan, the chaos in Eastern Europe is not like the decisive battle of Heaven Capital. It involves the voice of more than a dozen countries in the Dark World. The struggle between countries, the choice of wealthy families, and the entanglement of religions are more than a pool of muddy water. It's simply a quagmire. I'll give you a suggestion. When you arrive in Eastern Europe, seize the opportunity to fight Knights Templars and the Jiang family of South America. Don't care about anything else. Finish the most important task first, put yourself in an invincible position, and find opportunities to plan other things. Dongqing Wudi looked at Li Tianlan deeply and repeated again, "What I'm saying is, don't worry about anything except your own task. In the chaos, no one can see the overall situation clearly. Great credit may become a trap in the blink of an eye. You are the commander of the Snowdance Corps, so on the battlefield of Zhongzhou State, you have to be responsible for the 20,000 elites of the Snowdance Corps. He paused and said heavily, "You only need to be responsible for these 20,000 people." What he said could not be clearer. He was the commander of the Snowdance Corps. When necessary, he had to give up Wang Tianzong, Sidu Cangyue, Tribulation, and everyone, including Qin Weibai. That was the most conservative approach. As long as he completed his task and fulfilled his duties, other than the Snowdance Corps, no matter how many people he gave up, it was just a decision-making choice. In any case, it was difficult to connect it with treason. Li Tianlan did not agree with such conservatism, but he could not refute it. In Eastern Europe, he had to be responsible for the Snowdance Corps. But if Eastern Europe and the Snowdance Corps were linked together, he also had to be responsible for the Li family, the Dongqing clan, and all the forces that supported him. Li Tianlan would not give up something that he could not give up. But at this time, he could only be silent. "I will have a good sense of propriety." Li Tianlan was silent for a long time before he whispered. "The Snowdance Corps will not have a big problem. Just keep an eye on the vice-marshal, the supervisor, and the small groups around them." Bai Zhanfang said, "The problem is still Wang Tianzong himself." Speaking of Wang Tianzong, the old counselor of Zhongzhou State's tone was full of undisguised seriousness. Absolute force might not determine everything in the general trend, but at some subtle key points, it was enough to exert earth-shattering power. Li Tianlan now had a good hand in his hand. But Wang Tianzong had a sword in his hand. At a critical moment, he might be able to smash the entire chessboard with a sword. "It's okay." Dongqing Wudi hesitated for a while and finally shook his head slowly. "It's okay?" Bai Zhanfang looked at Dongqing Wudi. For him, this was the most important thing. "I've contacted Boss Qin." Dongqing Wudi looked at Bai Zhanfang and then at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. Dongqing Wudi continued, "In the early stage of the chaos in Eastern Europe, the possibility of Wang Tianzong taking action is not high. If he takes action, he must have the confidence to confirm Tianlan's treason after his death. This requires a good enough opportunity and time to brew. Otherwise, if it is too obvious, does he really regard Zhongzhou State as nothing? During the time when Wang Tianzong is brewing his conspiracy, Tianlan can open up the situation in Eastern Europe, and Boss Qin will try his best to guide the situation. Although everything is risky, it is not completely uncontrollable. There were always risks. No matter what trump cards they had, for Li Tianlan and everyone in the dark world, Wang Tianzong was an unreachable peak. This was the biggest risk. What if Wang Tianzong insists on taking action at the last moment? Bai Zhanfang asked. The Samsara Palace is already prepared. Dongqing Wudi's tone was a little hesitant. What preparation? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. He looked at Dongqing Wudi with clear eyes. Bai Zhanfang was also looking at Dongqing Wudi, his eyes focused and condensed. It's the chosen one stroke. Dongqing Wudi said slowly. His tone was a little confused. Obviously, he didn't know where the sword came from. He just said a fact he heard. The real chosen one's sword at the peak state. No matter how strong Wang Tianzong is, he can't block that sword unscathed. Bai Zhanfang fell silent. Li Tianlan's eyes were a little wandering. The chosen one stroke. In a trance, Li Tianlan thought of a lot of things. He didn't know how many people had heard of that name. But he trusted Qin Weibai. So he could be sure that for hundreds of years, in addition to the original ancestors of the Wang family of Beihai, the chosen one really existed. Dongqing Huang. Li Tianlan had asked a lot of people. He asked Dongqing Hongguang and Dongqing Wudi, Dongqing Rushi and Dongqing Qiuqi, Zhuang Huayang, Li Beidian, and Ning Chenqing. But it seemed that no one had heard of the name. The answers he got were all negative. The chosen one was nameless. But how could the chosen one really be nameless? The history of Zhongzhou State seemed to be missing a certain period of time, as if a big hand had erased all traces of his existence. Li Tianlan didn't think that no one knew Dongqing Huangtu. At least he didn't think that Dongqing Hongguang and Dongqing Wudi didn't know. He had always thought that people who knew Dongqing Huangtu were unwilling to mention the name. Li Tianlan had been curious about the Chosen One and had pursued him. But he didn't think that the other party could have much interference and influence on his future. After all, no matter how glorious the Chosen One was, it was all in the past. So after the fruitless pursuit, he gradually let go of his doubts and curiosity, like wanting to hear stories. But until now, the Chosen One stroke. And it was the peak stroke of the Chosen One. It suddenly appeared in the Samsara Palace's plan. From Li Tianlan's current perspective, he could vaguely realize how powerful Wang Tianzong had become. He had almost surpassed the limit of the invincible realm and had half a foot out of the invincible realm. In this state, as long as Wang Tianzong took a small step forward, for this era, he would be the real Chosen One. To be able to suppress Wang Tianzong in this state, it must be the sword of the real Chosen One. Dongqing Huangtu. It could only be Dongqing Huangtu. This was the first time, unprecedented, that Li Tianlan felt so close to the mysterious Chosen One. It turned out that he had something to do with him. At least now, his sword had become an important trump card for him to retreat in Eastern Europe. Was Dongqing Huangtu still alive? If so, since he was willing to attack Wang Tianzong with the spirit of the Chosen One, it was impossible for him to limit himself to Eastern Europe and Snow Country. If he was really dead, where did his sword come from? Li Tianlan thought of Dongqing Huangtu and the Samsara Palace. Naturally, he suddenly thought of the sword stroke that the master of Samsara Palace faced Wang Tianzong when she went straight into Mount Dibbing more than 3 years ago. He didn't see that sword stroke, but he had heard about it afterward. The sword stroke of the master of Samsara Palace was the 15th blade, Samsara, of the 24 moves of sword. Qin Weibai once said that the master of Samsara Palace was not at the top of the divine list, but she had a sword stroke that was enough to fight against any peak of the invincible realm. Based on the vague relationship between the Samsara Palace and Dongqing Huangtu, Li Tianlan seemed to know whose sword intent the master of Samsara Palace's Samsara was. But now the headquarters of the Samsara Palace was destroyed. Although the master of Samsara Palace was not dead, she must know Wang Tianzong's state and strength at this time. Peak of the invincible realm? Wang Tianzong was no longer at the peak of the invincible realm. He had vaguely broken through half a step again. Could the sword stroke of the master of Samsara still threaten Wang Tianzong? And the sword intent simulated by Samsara? It was impossible to reach the level of the Chosen One's sword, let alone the sword at the peak. Li Tianlan was very sure of this. The sword stroke of the master of Samsara Palace was very powerful. But it was impossible for her Samsara to reproduce Dongqing Huangtu's peak sword intent. So where did this sword stroke come from? Did it really exist? Li Tianlan's mind was a little confused. It seemed that from this moment on, the name Dongqing Huangtu was no longer a story in his mind. This name was associated with the Samsara Palace, the master of Samsara Palace, and even Qin Weibai, the Dongqing clan, and him. It was subtle and distant. Li Tianlan shook his head violently. What's wrong? Dongqing Wudi noticed Li Tianlan's abnormality and asked casually. General. Li Tianlan looked at Dongqing Wudi. He took a deep breath, and his eyes became unprecedentedly calm and serious. I want to know someone. Go ahead. Dongqing Wudi nodded. Who is Dongqing Huangtu? He asked, looking into Dongqing Wudi's eyes. Bai Zhanfang paused slightly and turned to glance at Dongqing Wudi. Dongqing Wudi's body stiffened for a moment, and he subconsciously avoided Li Tianlan's gaze. Li Tianlan was looking at Dongqing Wudi. Dongqing Wudi and Bai Zhanfang's eyes met in an instant. The place that was once called Fairyland seemed to have vitality no matter how much it suffered. In Lin, an lonely mountain which had been closed for more than 3 years, turned into ruins overnight. In the discussion of the people, the sign of a forbidden military area had been put up here as quickly as possible. Countless engineering teams began to rush to establish the Special Warfare Supervision Department in the southeast of Zhongzhou State. The remaining dozen or so people of the Li family became the most serious supervisors, supervising the construction team's construction period, and guarding the Li family cemetery on Lonely Mountain, the only place that had not been destroyed in that battle. The huge cemetery was at the end of Lonely Mountain. Now Lonely Mountain had become a flat land, but the cemetery was still built on a high place, high above, as if overlooking the supervision department that was under construction. Once again, greenery and flowers appeared on the ruins of Lonely Mountain. The flowers and plants grew very fast and were full of vitality. In the scene of busy construction, they looked very pleasing. The people of the Li family had left Qin Weibai's villa. They built a few simple small houses between the cemetery and the construction site, and stayed here every day. In the dead of night, standing in the Li family cemetery and looking down, the huge cemetery, the simple huts, the unfinished construction site, the gradually flourishing flowers and plants, and the West Lake not far away were wrapped in the cold starlight, looking like a desolate but very lively painting. A man and a woman appeared in the huge cemetery. The two came from the foot of the mountain on the water, avoiding the perception of all the people of the Li family, and walked into the cemetery. The slope of the cemetery was obvious, layer by layer. The man with a simple appearance and temperament walked to the highest point of the cemetery and sat on a tombstone at random. Looking at the large cemetery in his sight, he was lost in thought and was silent for a long time. Silence was a kind of power. It was also an indescribable momentum. He sat quietly on the tombstone, quietly and silently. But the whole cemetery seemed to become real in his silence, so real that it seemed to be out of this illusory world. A beautiful woman in a fiery red dress stood quietly beside the man. The woman was in her 30s, mature and well-developed. Her face, which should have been cold and elegant, became as charming as water when she stood next to the man. She stood next to the man and looked at the place where she was going to live. Her eyes flashed and no one knew what she was thinking. "How about this place?" The man suddenly asked. "It's very good." The woman smiled. She stared at the man's face in a daze. There was respect in her eyes, but also a deep tenderness. "The flowers and plants here are blooming very well. When you don't talk, you can hear the sound of flowers blooming. It's really good." The man smiled and said, "But it's not the best. The flowers here don't deserve you." The woman tilted her head and looked at him with some doubts. The man narrowed his eyes. In the dim night, his eyes were a little cold. "There used to be the most beautiful flower here. What about now?" The woman seemed to feel the change in the man's temperament and asked cautiously. The man said calmly, "It was taken away." He was silent for a moment and continued, "But it doesn't matter. You stay here first. After a while, I will bring the flower back to you. Happy New Year's Day to everyone. It's the beginning of the month. I'm very serious about asking for a guaranteed monthly vote, brothers. Support me crazily. I'll continue to guarantee 8,000 words tomorrow. Will you vote monthly? Will you? At least 8,000 words the day after tomorrow. What about the day after tomorrow?" Chapter 403. It was August. There was still sunlight in the northernmost part of the world. But the sunlight was fading. The sunlight fell from the highest point of the sky. It was no longer bright or warm. It shone in the cold city, with obvious alienation and indifference. The midsummer was not over. The sky in Mormons was getting colder and colder. The manor near the port was still dotted with green, but the flowers had withered. The luxurious atmosphere was more desolate in the cold weather. It was not dilapidated, but it was enough to make people feel melancholy. Mormons was about to enter the polar night. But in the afterglow of the polar day, the sun still hung in the sky for 24 hours. The midsummer in Mormons was still as cold as winter even in the polar day. At 3 o'clock in the night, the temperature was close to 0 degrees Celsius. The dock not far from the manor was still busy, and the occasional whistle cut through the night sky. Flaming Fire, who had been with Qin Weibai for the longest time in the Samsara Palace, held a very special container in her hand and carefully collected morning dew behind the manor. A very special and rare grass tree was planted behind the manor. It was said to be a tree, but it was not tall, reaching the waist. It was said to be a grass, but it was much taller. The living environment of this kind of grass tree had extremely harsh requirements for air temperature and air humidity. Although it could live in Mormons, It was not as green as it was in the headquarters of the Samsara Palace. The cold air rose in the sun, which had not yet arrived in the early morning. The cold air turned into dew, hanging on the leaves of the grass tree, crystal clear. Flaming Fire silently thought of the headquarters of the Samsara Palace. She collected the dew on the leaves into the container and calmly returned to the main villa. The collected morning dew was poured into a purifying gas. The dew was purified and boiled. Flaming Fire opened the refrigerator. There were several gorgeous crystal bottles in the refrigerator, which were filled with ice cubes. Flaming Fire took out some ice cubes and put them into the boiling dew. She added a little honey and shook it gently. Finally, she put the water into a delicate thermos pot. She was busy in the kitchen with brisk and skillful movements. At nearly 4 o'clock in the morning, she baked the bread with Mormon's most famous caviar and fried a small piece of steak. The light was on in the bedroom on the second floor of the villa. The light and the sunlight in the polar day met inside and outside the villa. Flaming Fire began to cut the fruit. There weren't many fruits, but there were plenty of varieties. Qin Weibai, who had slept for less than 4 hours, washed up and walked out of the bedroom. "Boss." Flaming Fire, who had just finished her work, placed the food on the table. Qin Weibai nodded, sat down at the table and sipped water. Ice was added to the hot water, and the temperature was just right, bringing with it a refreshing sweetness. His spirit returned to Qin Weibai bit by bit. Her face was pale and haggard, but her eyes were gradually filled with an indescribable radiance. Flaming Fire did not prepare breakfast for herself. She just sat opposite Qin Weibai and watched her drink water. When she was completely sober, Flaming Fire said softly, "Boss, Horsewoman sent a message that deity has left Heaven Capital and his whereabouts are unknown." Qin Weibai paused in the act of drinking water, picked up the knife and fork, and lazily and elegantly cut the steak in front of her. There were only 7 of the 12 famous supermasters of Samsara Palace left, and 5 of them had been killed by Wang Tianzong's domineering sword. Flaming Fire followed Qin Weibai. Saint, military counselor, duke, and general, the 4 strongest supermasters were all seriously injured. Ghost voluntarily accepted the transformation and became a member of the Devil Troop. Now it was still dormant after being transferred from the headquarters to Snow Country. Horsewoman had been staying in East Island, but her task was not to keep an eye on deity. So now she could only get the news that deity had left Heaven Capital. No movement from Purple Night? Qin Weibai ate a piece of steak and asked softly. She thought of the prince who was sent to the purgatory of Heaven Capital by the East Island royal family, and a trace of mockery flashed in her eyes. "No," Flaming Fire said calmly, "she has been with deity for 3 years, and they have no children." Qin Weibai quietly ate breakfast and kept silent for a long time. There was only a small piece of steak left, and the bread and fruit gradually disappeared. "I see." Qin Weibai stood up and turned to the study. Flaming Fire picked up the thermos and followed with Qin Weibai's cup. "Let Horsewoman come to Snow Country," Qin Weibai suddenly said. Flaming Fire nodded subconsciously and said hesitantly, "Heaven Capital, it's meaningless." Qin Weibai's voice was ethereal and distant. "He has no chance. Snow Country needs people, and it will be more convenient for Horsewoman to come here." The two walked into the study. The study was luxurious and large, but it was not spacious. Countless documents were piled up in every corner of the study, so full that there was almost no room for people to stand. Qin Weibai looked at all this, walked to the desk with a calm look and sat down. She was slender and tall, but sitting behind the desk, she was almost completely drowned by the piles of documents everywhere. But Flaming Fire knew that the documents in front of her were not all. After returning from the Holy Land to Mormons, this was the 5th batch of documents that had been moved to the study, or intelligence. All the intelligence of the Samsara Palace since its establishment. It spanned a long time and involved the whole dark world, countless wealthy families, a large number of countries, and densely packed organizations. As for individuals, it was an extremely complicated and detailed network of contacts, as numerous as the stars. It had been nearly 3 days since Qin Weibai returned from the Holy Land. She had hardly rested in the past 3 days. She had just slept for a while. She spent all her time looking through the intelligence. It seemed that she wanted to reorganize all the intelligence since the appearance of the Samsara Palace. She read it carefully and seriously. No one knew what she was looking for. The direction she was looking for was the whole direction. The internal strife within the wealthy families, the grievances between each other. The internal strife within the countries, the wars between countries. Every conflict in the dark world. The confrontation between the major dark forces. The conspiracy and betrayal between the Eastern Church and the Vatican. All the experts who had appeared in the dark world in recent decades. Even some anecdotes were in the scope of what she was looking for. Flaming Fire once proposed to mobilize a group of elites in intelligence to help, but Qin Weibai refused without hesitation. Some things were not a matter of trust, but could only be done by herself. Qin Weibai quickly browsed through the recent events in Eastern Europe, and then buried herself in the mountain of intelligence again, reading carefully. Time in the study seemed to freeze, and only the sound of folders being opened and pages being turned could be heard. Flaming Fire kept moving out the information that Qin Weibai had read and then brought in new information and materials. So the spacious study was always so crowded, and there was almost no place to stand. Flaming Fire was moving. Qin Weibai never moved. She just quietly read the intelligence collected by the Samsara Palace. The light in the study was flowing and shining on Qin Weibai. Everything was so beautiful, so natural and so calm. But what Flaming Fire thought of was Qin Weibai's more than 50 hours of sleeplessness after returning from the Holy Land. During that long and repetitive time, she could feel the anxiety hidden in Qin Weibai's appearance. Even panic. That was not the panic after things were out of control. It was a kind of unpreparedness, unpredictability, and bewilderment in the face of the unknown. Another batch of intelligence materials was moved in. All the materials were copies sent from the intelligence agencies of the Samsara Palace all over the dark world. They were the kind that would be burned after reading. Qin Weibai had been reading in silence. After she finished reading the materials, she threw them into the stove, and the smoke drifted to the outside world. The sun was getting brighter. Flaming Fire turned off the light and gently opened the curtains. The cold sunlight fell into the study. Qin Weibai raised her head and looked at the light outside the window. For nearly half a year, there was no night in Mormons, and the sun always existed. Time passed on the dial, and the hands ticked. In the shining sun all day long, time seemed to have lost its meaning, and so did the clock. Qin Weibai looked at it silently for a while. The sunlight in Mormons was not even dazzling. The sun was hot, but it was as cold as the moon. For a moment, she seemed to be lost in such an environment. She didn't know day and night, the sun and the moon. She kept this position and was silent for a long time. Go and invite Mr. Lin. At a certain moment, Qin Weibai suddenly said in a light voice. Flaming Fire nodded, turned around, and went out. Lin Fengting came quickly. His intention to protect Qin Weibai was obvious, so he lived in the guest room on the first floor. Now that he had handed over the position of the patriarch of the Lin clan to Qin Weibai, he was relaxed and looked more and more handsome. When he walked into the study, he was stunned when he saw the materials piled up in the study. Then he laughed. I heard that you haven't had much rest since you came back. Are you so busy? There are some things that I have to figure out. Qin Weibai said softly. Lin Fengting said. He sat down opposite Qin Weibai and asked directly, What can I do for you? I want to see the person in charge of intelligence of the Lin clan. Qin Weibai said. Now she had the power of the patriarch of the Lin clan and the qualification to give orders. But the Lin clan was not a family. It was a clan scattered all over the world. There were internal connections, but they were very loose on ordinary days. Even Qin Weibai needed some time to adapt to this unusual mode of operation. The person in charge of the Lin clan was naturally not in the headquarters of the Lin clan. Strictly speaking, the intelligence agency of the Lin clan was equivalent to several branches separated from the headquarters, but it always kept in close contact with the headquarters. Different from the intelligence agency of the Wang family of Beihai, The intelligence system of the Lin clan was also unknown in the Dark World. It was composed of countless intelligence organizations, large and small, and even seemingly unrelated, all over the world. It was huge but also loose. "I'll give you the contact information," Lin Fengting said. Lin Fengting said. He thought for a moment, then continued, "How about this? I'll call some important people over in the next few days. You can meet them. If you need them, just give them instructions." Qin Weibai nodded. Lin Fengting's attitude now became very subtle. At the beginning, she just wanted to borrow Lin Fengting's sword. Now Lin Fengting was here. He didn't want to fight with other dark forces. He didn't care about the so-called victory or defeat, let alone the Samsara Palace. What he wanted was to protect himself from death. Qin Weibai was very clear about this. Therefore, the headquarters of the Lin clan could provide her with Xianyuan's sword, a super force hidden in the dark, and some peripheral help provided by the major branches of the Lin clan. These were basically the greatest support for her. From the bottom of his heart, even if Lin Fengting handed over the position of patriarch to her, he didn't want the whole Lin clan to be involved in the general trend of the Dark World. "Have you gained anything these days?" Lin Fengting looked around at the intelligence and asked. Qin Weibai shook her head. She pursed her lips, and her eyes were a little tired. "If I had gained anything, I wouldn't have borrowed the intelligence system of the Lin clan. I have a hunch that I can't find any clues in the intelligence of the Samsara Palace." Lin Fengting frowned. "No clue at all?" he asked thoughtfully. "No." Qin Weibai shook her head. "If that's the case, the Lin clan may not have any clues." Lin Fengting smiled helplessly. "In some ways, the intelligence of the Samsara Palace is unique. If we can't find any clues in the Samsara Palace, what valuable things can the intelligence of the Lin clan, which doesn't care much about the Dark World? But in terms of execution, the execution of the intelligence system of the Lin clan is far better than that of the Samsara Palace." Qin Weibai looked at Lin Fengting and said, "This is what I value most. I can't find anything here, and it's meaningless to go through the intelligence of the Lin clan. But the Lin clan can continue to investigate. We have no clues now, but we have a very obvious target." "Follower?" Lin Fengting raised his eyebrows. "Follower." Qin Weibai nodded and said affirmatively. "That man's true strength is infinitely close to the peak of the invincible realm, and he is even stronger than Aldak, the killing angel of the Vatican, who died in Heaven Capital 3 years ago. Now that he has been crowned, his true strength is enough to rank in the top 5 on the divine list. To investigate him, it is too difficult to start with him or the Holy Disarmament Corps of the Vatican." Lin Fengting frowned and said, "On this trip to the Holy Land, what shocked him the most was not the unfathomable Pope, but the extremely mysterious follower. As the Vice Marshal of the Holy Disarmament Corps, he only showed the combat capability of the invincible realm. But at the moment of fighting in the hotel, his true strength was not far from Aris's. This meant that even if he was not Lin Fengting's opponent after the crowning, the gap between them was no longer that of heaven and earth, but that it could be seen. It was not only difficult to investigate such a person, but also absolutely dangerous. No matter how difficult it is, we have to go on. You know what it means." Qin Weibai said. Lin Fengting was silent. He naturally knew what it meant. An invincible realm expert infinitely close to the peak of the invincible realm was just a follower. In that case, who is the highness behind him? What was this person plotting by hiding in the Vatican? Only by investigating the follower and finding out who the highness behind him is can I be sure of something. Qin Weibai said, "Investigate the intelligence of the Vatican first. Go deeper step by step, enter the Holy Disarmament Corps, and finally find out the details of the follower. It doesn't make much sense for him to sneak into the Holy Disarmament Corps. There must be their people in the Holy Disarmament Corps. My only guess now is that the person behind the scenes wants to control the Vatican by letting an expert close to the peak of the invincible realm sneak into the Vatican. The follower is now close to Holy Virgin Angel. They are already very close to something." The internal structure of the Vatican was simple and complicated. As the Holy Virgin of the Vatican, angels' responsibility was equally great. The position of the Holy Virgin in the Vatican was second only to that of the Pope. In addition to being responsible for spreading the glory of the Lord, they also had the right to choose the spokesperson for the Lord. The spokesperson of the Lord was naturally the Pope. The Holy Virgin did not have the power to appoint the Pope, but she had the power to choose the candidate for the Pope. In the end, a new Pope would be elected by the cardinals. Why don't we tell the Vatican the identity of the follower? Lin Fengting said thoughtfully. It doesn't make sense. Qin Weibai answered without hesitation. In the final battle in Snow Country, we need the power of the follower. Moreover, the follower is the only clue exposed by the so-called highness. If we tell the Vatican the news, we will take the initiative to cut off this clue. An expert close to the peak of the invincible realm is indeed terrible, but I'm more worried about the person behind him. What on earth are you worried about? Lin Fengting looked at Qin Weibai and asked. Qin Weibai froze for a moment. She was silent for a long time before she suddenly smiled and told the truth from the bottom of her heart. In terms of martial arts aptitude, I'm really ordinary and not outstanding. What she said was inexplicable. But Lin Fengting's face changed slightly. What I'm worried about is naturally the mysterious highness. I don't know him, but obviously he knows me. That's the most abnormal thing. What's there to worry about the follower? After all, he's a person who has been exposed. Even if he's really at the peak of the invincible realm, in the end, he's just a dog of someone else. She looked at Lin Fengting and said, Have you ever seen someone who uses an expert close to the peak of the invincible realm as a dog? I have, but he died in the end, and the highness behind the follower. She didn't continue, but was thinking about something. At present, no one is in line with that highness, not Wang Tianzong, not deity, and not you, sir. How can anyone else have such courage? Qin Weibai said. Have you ever seen someone who uses an expert close to the peak of the invincible realm as a dog? Lin Fengting suddenly asked quietly. His tone was frighteningly quiet. He's dead, Qin Weibai said. When she spoke of this fact, there was no emotion in her eyes. She was just a little absent-minded. Are you sure he's dead? Lin Fengting's voice was even quieter. But such a quiet sentence seemed to carry the chill of the whole Mormons. In an instant, it oppressed the whole study, and a cold feeling came over. Qin Weibai's expression didn't change. She just looked at Lin Fengting. Do you think it's him? She asked. Is it possible? There are always some facts that can't be explained. For example, the one in Heaven Capital. Lin Fengting said. It's different. Qin Weibai shook her head. You know it yourself. It's impossible. Maybe. Lin Fengting said. Any invincible realm expert has karma. Qin Weibai didn't seem to take Lin Fengting's speculation to heart. Before this, in the whole dark world, only you have the least karma. The karma of an invincible realm expert was the karma of the dark world. The karma of the dark world was blood, killing, hatred, kindness, standpoint, and involuntary. Before this, only Lin Fengting had the least karma. But followers have no karma. Qin Weibai said, At least, I can't find his karma. That's why I have to continue to look for him. If I find out his followers, the highness behind him will be exposed. Do you suspect that highness is an enemy? Lin Fengting asked. Now, in a sense, they were still in a state of cooperation with that highness. I hate the unknown. Qin Weibai shook her head. And even if he's not an enemy, at least he won't be a friend. If this person is not found out, sooner or later, he will be a big trouble for the whole dark world. The sound of helicopter rotors suddenly sounded outside the window. Qin Weibai raised her eyebrows. Flaming Fire, who was guarding outside, pushed the door open in time and said calmly, Boss, Miss Qin is here. Qin Weibai agreed. After thinking for a moment, she stood up and walked out of the study. Let's go and have a look. The sound of the rotor roared over the entire manor. The helicopter landed slowly. The sun passed through the rotor, leaving a rotating mottled brilliance on the ground. Qin Weibai walked out of the villa. The helicopter landed on the lawn in front of the villa and gradually quieted down. The cabin door was opened. A young woman with a pure face got off the plane. When she saw Qin Weibai, she trotted over excitedly, took Qin Weibai's hand, and said with a charming smile, "Sister." Lin Fengting, who followed Qin Weibai out of the villa, looked confused. He didn't know what was going on. "This is my sister." Qin Weibai introduced them to each other. "This is Mr. Lin." The young woman took the initiative to reach out her hand and said with a natural and unrestrained smile, "I'm Qin Weian." "Qin Weibai, Qin Wei." "Sister, sister." Lin Fengting's mind went blank for a moment, but his eyes fell on Qin Weibai. The Qin family of Baiyu State should be one of the largest Chinese wealthy families in Eastern Europe. Qin Weibai smiled. Lin Fengting opened his mouth wide. Baiyu State bordered snow country and was one of the small countries in Eastern Europe. However, the Qin family in Baiyu State was absolutely famous in Eastern Europe and the entire Dark World. It was one of the top Chinese wealthy families in Europe. In Eastern Europe, it was enough to compete with super wealthy families like Morton and Violet. Even several of the most powerful branches of the Lin clan had cooperation with the Qin family in many ways. It was not surprising that Qin Weiyun came from the Qin family. But Qin Weibai, the Qin family of Baiyu State? Lin Fengting shook his head hard. His voice was a little hoarse. "Are you a member of the Qin family?" "No." Qin Weibai was stunned and then shook her head. "It's just a coincidence of names. Don't get me wrong, sir. This is my sworn sister. If I were a member of the Qin family, do you think other forces in the Dark World wouldn't find out? But Samsara Palace does maintain some secret cooperation with the Qin family." Lin Fengting laughed at himself. Indeed, not only Zhongzhou State, but all the major forces in the world had investigated the origin of Qin Weibai, the number 2 figure of Samsara Palace. The Qin family of Baiyu State was a behemoth that couldn't be hidden even if they wanted to. If Qin Weibai came from the Qin family, even if she did a good job of keeping it a secret, she would have been found out long ago. "Yes, third grandpa asked me to ask you if you have time to go to Baiyu State. He asked me to tell you that it's time to make up your mind about some cooperation," Qin Weiyun said with a chuckle. Her appearance was not absolutely beautiful, but she was extremely delicate, especially the kind of purity from inside to outside, which made her look indescribably kind and amiable. Qin Weibai thought for a moment and nodded. "Then I'll go once." Her eyes fell on Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting shrugged indifferently and said with a smile, "I'll stay and gather some clansmen here. When you come back, you should be able to see them. You take flaming fire with you." "Then let's go." Qin Weibai nodded and decisively walked to the helicopter on the lawn. Qin Weiyun smiled brightly and waved at Lin Fengting. The roar of the helicopter's rotors sounded again. Lin Fengting looked up. The helicopter was getting farther and farther in his sight, and finally became a small dot. Almost at the same time Qin Weibai left the manor. A figure wrapped in a black cloak stepped into the manor unhurriedly. The black figure's footsteps were neither fast nor slow. He walked and stopped in the manor and finally stopped in front of the main villa. Lin Fengting still stood there, looking at the mysterious and somewhat sneaky black-robed man calmly. He smiled calmly and said, "You are?" The black-robed man seemed to be stunned for a moment. He hesitated for a while and then said with a smile, "Mr. Lin?" Lin Fengting nodded. The black-robed man hesitated for a moment and finally took off the black cloak, revealing the Daoist robe that looked extremely sage-like on him. "I'm Xianxia." Xianxia chuckled and said, "In the Samsara Palace, my code name is Tianji." Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes. The 12 super masters of the Samsara Palace became the 13 super masters. Almost no one knew about this except for a few core figures. But Lin Fengting knew. "I've heard a lot about you, Daoist." He smiled and asked directly, "Daoist, what's the matter? Boss Qin just left. I shouldn't have let her see this. It's best for her to leave," Xianxia said with a smile. Lin Fengting raised his eyebrows. He was confused. "This manor is very big, but Mr. Lin, don't you feel that something is missing?" Xianxia suddenly asked. "What is missing?" Lin Fengting looked around casually. The manor was luxurious. The villa was beautiful. The lawn was smooth. But the weather was too cold, and some flowers had withered, making it look a little desolate. Qin Weibai was proud and aloof, so she obviously didn't care about this. It's missing vitality. Xianxia took out a small bottle from his arms and said with a smile, it's missing the vitality of the manor, the vitality of the Samsara palace, and the vitality of the boss. He held the small bottle and said gently, if you have nothing to do, you can come with me to see a miracle. It's my honor. Lin Fengting seemed to know what Xianxia meant. His eyes lit up quietly. The two passed by the villa and continued to walk backward. They walked all the way to the back of the manor. A patch of grass and trees was planted at the back. The morning dew had been collected once, but the cold air rose, and the morning dew appeared on the leaves again. Under the sunlight, it looked extremely crystal. Before joining the Samsara palace, I heard some interesting rumors from a little friend. It said that the boss only drinks some purified morning dew or mountain spring water in a few specific places every day, and only eats some fruits and vegetables. That little friend is one of the boss's crazy admirers. He mentioned the boss that day and said that the boss is an otherworldly goddess. Xianxia looked at the trees and grass in front of him and said with a strange smile, how can it be so exaggerated? Lin Fengting laughed. You mean Xiaoyao, right? I seem to have heard about it. Boss Qin does have high requirements for food, but when there's no morning dew or mountain spring, she still drinks purified water. Besides, she doesn't eat meat, only fruits and vegetables. Does Xiaoyao think that Boss Qin is a wild rabbit in the mountains? It's just a rumor, it's always interesting. Xianxia smiled. He suddenly glanced at Lin Fengting and asked, Mr. Lin, I heard from military counselor that the boss asked you to borrow a sword, and now you are inviting her to join the Lin clan? Lin Fengting was slightly stunned and nodded. She is now the acting patriarch of the Lin clan. Congratulations, Mr. Lin. Congratulations to the Lin clan. Xianxuanzi's smile gradually widened. Congratulations? Lin Fengting murmured to himself, Daoist priest, there seems to be a hidden meaning in your words. I should have congratulated her. Not to mention the help the boss's wisdom brings to the Lin clan. Now that Eastern Europe is in chaos, no one is optimistic about the Samsara palace in this final battle. If the Samsara palace collapses, maybe the supermasters who have not participated in the Samsara can protect some core things of the Samsara palace. But the peripheral things are also priceless and unimaginable. If the boss joins the Lin clan, I think she doesn't value the peripheral things. These things will naturally be taken over by the Lin clan. Xianxuanzi said calmly. Lin Fengting was stunned for a moment. He really didn't think of this. What he valued was Qin Weibai's value to the Lin clan in the future, but he ignored the benefits she had accumulated before after she joined the Lin clan. I didn't think about this. Lin Fengting told the truth. It doesn't matter. Xianxuanzi said blandly, I just want to tell you that the Samsara will be destroyed, and the boss will die. You have your way of protection, and I have my way. I brought the boss a chance of survival today. In the future, when she enters the Lin clan and uses the power of the Lin clan to fulfill her promise to me, I hope you can remember my contribution today. Lin Fengting didn't say anything but asked, where is the chance of survival? Xianxuanzi looked down at the small bottle in his hand. Just waiting for the wind to rise. Would you like to help me, Mr. Lin? Lin Fengting took a deep look at Xianxuanzi. He took a step forward. In an instant, the sword intent in the entire manor soared into the sky. Infinite sword energy crisscrossed over the manor, covering the entire manor. The sword energy brought up the wind. It kept whistling. Xianxuanzi laughed. Whether from a metaphysical point of view or from a practical point of view, Lin Fengting's sword was needed to protect Qin Weibai's life. He walked into the land planted with grass and trees and poured a pile of powder from the small bottle. The powder fell on his palm and was blown up by the wind. It was as light as dust. The wind formed by the sword energy blew the powder and scattered it in every corner of the manor. The sun shone down coldly. In an instant, the sound of flowers blooming was heard in the manor. With the strong wind, Flowers bloomed in the manner where the powder fell. Incomparably strong and bright colors bloomed in every corner of the manor in an instant. Thousands of purple and red colors were like a miracle. The coldness in the northernmost part of the world in midsummer still enveloped the sky of Mormons. The icy wind was getting stronger, and the polar night was coming. At the time when the polar sun and the polar night were about to alternate. For the first time, there was spring in the manor of Mormons. On the same day, in the early morning of Mormons, under the light of the polar sun, it was led by Holy Virgin Angel and Saint War Angel Arcis. 300 holy punishment priests and 800 saint warriors officially entered Eastern Europe and set foot in snow country. Chapter 404. Few people knew that there was a flower on Lonely Mountain in Lin. But those who knew the existence of this flower always kept it in mind. If one kept thinking about it, there would be an echo. Deity firmly believed in this truth. How long this flower existed was equal to how long it had taken root in the depths of his heart. This was one of the things he once wanted the most. Now he didn't need this flower anymore. But he could give this flower to others. He didn't need it, but he needed it. He needed this flower, so he would come to get it. He had been like this all his life, from childhood to adulthood. He didn't ask for help. If he wanted something, he would take it himself, rob it, and fight for it. The process didn't matter as long as he could get it. He had never considered whether these things belonged to him or not. For him, whatever he had the ability to have, no matter who it belonged to in the beginning, was in his hands. This was not domineering. It was a kind of bigotry that was integrated into the bone marrow. Deity didn't think there was anything wrong with this. The world he lived in was the dark world. The world they lived in was the dark world. There were no so-called moral restraints, no laws, no rules, no right or wrong, only strength. His bigotry once made him outstanding in his youth, made him high-spirited when he was young, and once made him fall into the abyss when he was at the peak of his youth. Now, when he had lived more than half of his life, at the age of middle age and old age, he once again stood at the peak of the world. Bigotry was not a shortcoming. It was faith. A man could have no bottom line, and even lose his humanity, but he always had faith. This was what supported the soul to live. There was no light in the ruins of Lonely Mountain in the dark. Deity sat on the tombstone at the back of the mountain, which was also the highest point. He looked down, thought about his own thoughts, and was silent for a long time. Phoenix in a fiery red dress stood quietly beside him, staring at Deity's ordinary but extraordinarily real side profile. The cemetery was full of grass. The wind blew through the grass, with a subtle but comfortable sound of the wind. The cemetery was cool, without the heat of midsummer. Deity had been silent, and the whole cemetery became more and more real with his silence, even a little depressed. Deity thought about the flower. After a long time, he waved his hand and said, "I haven't seen that flower either, but I think it should be very beautiful." That flower is called Flourishing Age, which is the dragon vein of Zhongzhou state. It gathers the fate of Zhongzhou state. So the more beautiful Zhongzhou state is, the more beautiful the flower is. He turned to look at Phoenix beside him. Is Zhongzhou state beautiful? It's not as good as Tiandu. Phoenix said softly. She spoke without hesitation. Zhongzhou state was the most powerful country in this era. Compared with it, even if East Island was not the so-called barbarian land, it was still far behind Zhongzhou state. Heaven capital was not even comparable to the territory of Zhongzhou state. But for Phoenix, Zhongzhou state was not as good as Heaven capital. What belongs to your highness is the most beautiful, she said softly. Yes. Deity's expression was calm. He nodded and chuckled. Zhongzhou state used to belong to me, so Zhongzhou state used to be very beautiful. Deity chuckled and nodded. It doesn't matter. When we get the dragon vein, Zhongzhou state will be ours sooner or later. Dragon vein. Phoenix hesitated for a moment. Deity's eyes turned and fell on her. I heard that the dragon vein is, she thought for a moment and suddenly didn't know how to address that person. The dragon vein seems to have been given to him by Great Master Wei. In the end, she could only use a very vague word. Deity nodded calmly. So now he is the dragon vein and the flower. Then you, Phoenix became more and more hesitant. It doesn't matter. Deity said softly, it's better for the dragon vein to be with him than to disappear. He has a flower on him, and there are roots here. When he dies and his blood is sprinkled on this land, the flower will bloom again. His voice was soft and cold. All flowers and plants need nutrients. Phoenix wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, she was silent. She had a lot to say. There was a flower on Lonely Mountain. This flower was the dragon vein. It was not only the purgatory of Heaven Capital and the Li family that knew this. As for Zhongzhou State, at least the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City also knew the existence of this flower. And they should also know that Li Tianlan was carrying the dragon vein now. The Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City naturally wanted this flower. But the reason why they wanted to kill Li Tianlan had nothing to do with this flower. It might be because both Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai hid the fact about this flower. But Phoenix always felt that if Li Tianlan's blood was sprinkled on this land, it would be too easy to reactivate the dragon vein of Zhongzhou State. It's really not easy. Deity seemed to know what Phoenix was worried about. He narrowed his eyes. The Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City naturally want this flower, but they can't get it. Even if Li Tianlan dies, they can't get it. Because they dare not pay the price. Since they can't get it, they won't think about it. But I'm different. They all say I'm crazy. I don't care about the price. Since they are so cowardly, this flower is naturally mine. This is not cowardice. A faint voice sounded. The voice was very far away and old, but it condensed into a line, crossed the entire cemetery, and rang in their ears. Deity looked into the distance with no expression. The phoenix looked down from above. She was a superior of the half-step invincible realm. Even at night, she could still see far. An old man appeared at the other end of the cemetery. He seemed to come in a hurry, so he looked a little haggard, but his footsteps did not stop at all. He crossed the tombstone and the grass. The somewhat old, somewhat stooped figure floated like a shadow and soon arrived in front of the two. Phoenix hesitated for a moment, but still subconsciously bowed slightly. Li Honghe, who rushed to Lin and from Yuzhou, did not go to see Phoenix, but just looked at Deity. The tombstone was very high. Deity sat on it, and Li Honghe needed to look up. The air was quiet for a while, and even the wind seemed to be silent. This was the meeting after more than 20 years. Everything was so strange, yet so familiar. Deity looked at Li Honghe quietly. The two stared at each other, one looking down, the other looking up, both expressionless. Li Honghe's aura was still weak, but his eyes focused little by little, and his eyebrows gradually rose. Come down. He looked at Deity on the tombstone, and his tone was dignified and heavy, like a command. Are you angry? In the long reunion, which seemed to be a lifetime without seeing each other again, Deity laughed softly. His smile was gentle, but the light in his eyes was gradually distorted. He patted the tombstone on which he was sitting. His movement was not heavy, but the whole tombstone shook with a loud bang, and the huge tombstone was vaguely covered with cracks. Is it because of this? Deity asked. Come down. Li Honghe's voice was low, close to a low roar. Now he had fallen from the invincible realm, his aura was weak, and his combat capability was weak. But at this time, there was a kind of scalp-numbing awe and fierceness in him. He was like an old lion whose territory had been touched. Although he was old, he could still wave his sharp claws. Deity jumped down from the tombstone. The tombstone was really high, taller than his whole body. So Deity also needed to look up at the tombstone. The tomb of Shui Jingqing. He looked at the tombstone expressionlessly and read. His figure was back to Li Honghe. In the midsummer night, his voice was like the chilly wind blowing from hell, with endless coldness and blood. I can probably understand the position of this tombstone in your heart. Those lying here are the heroes of the Li family. They have no regrets for the Li family until they sleep forever. Every drop of blood, every wound, and every life of the people in this cemetery is their contribution to the Li family. So this place is supreme in your heart, and it can't be desecrated. You don't allow me to sit on it. In your heart, I'm disrespecting the dead, right? Li Honghe's face twitched, and he didn't speak. But why should I respect it? Deity's voice was still cold. He didn't look back, just pointed to the tombstone in front of him. Who is Shui Jingqing? He's my brother. He was the first guard who followed me from the beginning. We were inseparable. When he was alive, we drank and ate together, killed enemies together, and graduated from the Sky Academy together. Most of the time, I was him and he was me. He was my most trusted brother. Li Honghe was still silent. Deity turned around. Of course, this was when he was alive. We once said that we would live and die together. Now I'm alive, and he's dead. Why should I respect him? My brother, does he need respect? He looked into Li Honghe's eyes, and his face was a little ferocious. But his voice was extremely suppressed and soft. Really? Really? Boom! The huge tombstone suddenly broke into countless pieces. Stones flew all over the sky with smoke and dust, and then were blown away by the wind. The night grew quieter. What he needs is to be alive. Deity's voice was low. His palm crossed Li Honghe and pointed to the tombstone in his sight. All the people here need to be alive, not respect. When people die, the lights go out. Respect? Does it make sense? Deity approached Li Honghe and looked into Li Honghe's old but firm eyes. It's the Li family who killed them, but when it comes to you and me, he paused and said heavily, is it you or me who killed them? You hate me. Li Honghe looked into Deity's eyes and said, I can't afford to hate you. Deity shook his head. But you're too pedantic and cling to your friendship. It's pure retribution that you end up like this. But those in the cemetery are all my brothers. They shouldn't be like this, but they're all implicated by your pedantry. If you're guilty, you're unforgivable. I took action 3 times in those days, but I was stopped by you. Before that, you were the person I admired the most and the greatest person in my heart. But after the establishment of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, you were the person I hated the most. You cared about your friendship with the Wang family of Beihai, but how did the Wang family of Beihai treat you? I had 3 chances, and each time, I had at least a 50% chance to swallow the Wang family of Beihai. At that time, the Li family dominated the Zhongzhou state. Deity looked at Li Honghe with a sneer. It was all ruined by you. You ruined it. Tell me, what's the use of your friendship? Li Honghe's eyes gradually became complicated. You still haven't repented. He said softly, you still think you're right. I'm wrong. Deity took a deep breath. I shouldn't have been stopped by you at the beginning. I'm wrong that I didn't completely realize your pedantry. Friendship? Have you ever seen a friendship that can last for hundreds of years? Every generation of the Wang family of Beihai is purging and seeking change. In the eyes of outsiders, isn't it an internal fratricide? Will you believe in the friendship of such a family? Old guy, what the hell are you thinking? For hundreds of years, the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai have been close, not because of the so-called friendship, but because we're strong enough. What's so-called friendship? Bullshit. If it was you who died more than 20 years ago instead of the one from the Wang family of Beihai, if Wang Tianzong had reached the invincible realm earlier than me, do you think the Wang family of Beihai would let us go when we were weak? What did I do wrong? Tell me, what did I do wrong back then? I just made a choice that anyone would have made. Everything you said is your assumption. If you hadn't done that, how could the Li family be where it is today? Assumption? If you hadn't stopped me back then, how could the Li family be where it is today? No one here will die. Today, we will be stronger and keep our word. Deity's voice was sharp and violent. There seemed to be a sudden gust of wind in the cemetery because of his momentum. The gust of wind was shrill. In the shrill wind, Li Honghe fell silent. Deity also fell silent and looked at the large cemetery in his sight again. The cause of that day and the effect of today have happened. What's the point of saying these things? After a long time, Li Honghe said slowly. His eyes became quiet. Once the silence lost its temperature, it would be very cold. What are you doing these days? He asked straightforwardly. I'm here to take back what belongs to me. Deity said, there's a flower here. I want that flower. At any cost. At any cost? Li Honghe raised the corner of his mouth and said with some mockery, can you use that flower? Deity waved his hand. Dressed in a fiery red dress, the beautiful Phoenix took 2 steps forward. Deity put his arm around Phoenix's still slender and soft waist. This is my woman. He looked at Li Honghe and said, now she has my son, and you have a grandson. Are you happy? Li Honghe's pupils suddenly contracted. I can't use that flower. Deity said coldly, but my son can always use it. That flower was originally prepared for Huawu. Now Huawu has been killed. My son and Phoenix's name is still Huawu, and he still needs that flower. This flower is not prepared for you. Li Honghe said quietly, I know Huao. I'm also sad that he was killed. But if he and Tianlan were in the thundershocking realm at the same time, he would never be Tianlan's opponent. Neither Huawu nor the unborn little guy can bear this flower. The wind was even more shrill. Deity was silent for a long time before he said expressionlessly, bullshit. A cold light flashed in Li Honghe's eyes. Before he could say anything, Deity had waved his hand. You can't stop me. He said coldly, just like I can't stop you. We have our own ideas, just like playing chess. You say you're good at chess, so why don't we play a game of chess? You want to use Tiannan as the chessboard, let Li Tianlan replace me, and take over the entire purgatory of Heaven Capital. This is your plan. And I want this flower to let Huawu replace Li Tianlan. I still have time to play with you and your good grandson, as long as you can afford it. You're still not convinced. Li Honghe's tone was complicated. His voice drifted in the wind, like crying and laughing. He was extremely bitter. I'm willing to bet and I'm willing to lose. Deity said blandly, I haven't bet yet. How can I be convinced? Phoenix will live here. When the flower blooms, she can support herself. Of course, if you are willing to take care of her, I can appreciate it. When I bring the flower back, we can see who is right and who is wrong. Deity continued. Li Honghe was silent. Deity could not bring back the flower. That was for sure. What he could bring back was only Li Tianlan's body. Li Honghe turned around and said calmly, follow me. He walked slowly out of the cemetery. Deity and Phoenix followed him without saying a word. The 3 of them passed the wooden house again, passed the construction site, walked to the side of Lonely Mountain, entered the former boundary of Mount Qingyun, and then came to the ruins of Qingyun Temple. Mount Qingyun collapsed, and Qingyun Temple was destroyed. But there were still specks of white fog in the middle of the night. Li Honghe's figure stopped somewhere. He pointed to the ground and looked at Deity. What do you see? Deity looked down and narrowed his eyes. Is this white fog the remaining luck? Can you see anything else out of the white fog? Li Honghe did not answer his question, but asked calmly. Deity frowned. The white fog in his sight was very thin, and he could clearly see the ground. The ground was very flat and empty. What do you want to say? He asked impatiently. Li Honghe smiled. It was a very sarcastic smile. Given the relationship between them, it had become like this. This smile was filled with a myriad of emotions. What about you? Li Honghe looked at Phoenix. What do you see? Phoenix hesitated, looked at Deity, and then looked at the ground. She stretched out her hand and pointed to the ground, whispering, this seems to be a rhizome. Rhizome? Deity raised his eyebrows. In his sight, the ground was still empty. How can you see the dragon vein if you have evil intentions? Li Honghe said coldly, don't you understand? You can't see the dragon vein. This flower has nothing to do with you from the very beginning. No one favors you. I don't, and neither does Wei. Deity narrowed his eyes and looked at Phoenix. Phoenix's face was a little pale, but she nodded and pointed to the ground carefully. Deity was silent for a long time. After a long time, he laughed. It doesn't matter. He whispered, so what if I can't see it? You can always see it. Do you think I will support you? Li Honghe looked at Deity expressionlessly. She looked at the man who was her son by blood. It doesn't matter. Deity said blandly. Li Tianlan is dead, so you can only support me. He turned around slowly. Linton is a good place. I have an appointment with someone here, and someone has an appointment with me here. He walked toward the outside world. You wait here and wait for me to bring the flower. Phoenix subconsciously wanted to follow him, but thinking of the child in her belly, she still stood where she was and stood in front of Li Honghe. Li Honghe looked at Deity's back as he left. You can't succeed, he said. Deity did not respond and continued to move forward. Li Honghe laughed. His voice gradually rose a little, and his voice line floated in the misty white mist. You will fall in the same place. His voice was firm. Twice. Someone did make an appointment with Deity. And Deity also made an appointment with someone else. The person who made an appointment with Deity set the location at the West Lake Club in Lin. So Deity also set the location here, and it was the same box. Meeting twice in the same place was enough to show Deity's confidence. The club was not far from Lonely Mountain, about 3 kilometers. Deity entered the club at the appointed time and walked into the box booked by the other party. There was red wine in the box. The red wine had just been opened, and the fragrance of the wine was spreading. There was a stack of fruit plates and a goblet in front of the red wine. A little further away from the fruit platter, there was a laptop that was turned on. The computer had a video on. In the video, a tall figure that looked a little fat appeared on the screen. This was a slightly stout man with short hair and a mask, but his eyes were extremely sharp. Deity entered the box and saw this strange scene, narrowing his eyes. Welcome, Your Highness. The man on the laptop screen laughed. His voice was soft, low, and magnetic. Should I call you Deity? Or Marshal Li? Did you make an appointment with me? Deity laughed. His voice was cold and fierce, sounding a little crazy. Interesting, really interesting. You sincerely asked me to meet. I came here from East Island, but you show me this laptop? Sorry. On the screen, the man's voice was faint and sounded insincere. I don't think it's necessary to meet face to face. As long as we can talk about something that interests each other, whether it's a video call or a real meeting, it's the same. If you want to have a video call, you can do it with me in Heaven Capital. Deity smiled coldly. Are you kidding me by asking me to come here to have a video call? The man was silent for a moment. I didn't mean that, he said softly. I hope Marshal Li doesn't misunderstand, but I had a little accident here. For the safety of both of us, I think it's the best way to meet here. And I know Marshal Li will come to Lin. For that flower, you should also come to Lin. His voice became softer and softer. Looking at the time, it should be time for your child's gender to be confirmed, right? Phoenix is a very beautiful woman. Marshal Li has good taste. Deity suddenly fell silent. In the purgatory of Heaven Capital, the news of Phoenix's pregnancy was a real top secret. Even his most trusted Daybreak and Dawn didn't know it. Who are you? Deity was silent for a moment, looked at the screen, and asked coldly. You can call me Your Highness. Of course, I prefer another title. You can call me Your Majesty. There were many highnesses in the Dark World. Every invincible realm expert could be called Your Highness. Some distinguished people, such as Wang Xingxiao, Wang Yuetong, Qin Weibai, and the heirs of the royal families of various countries, could also use this title. But His Majesty, there was only one Majesty in the Dark World. Deity laughed, and his laughter was a little crazy. A guy who doesn't even have a title dares to call himself Your Majesty? His Majesty is His Majesty. Does he need any title? Just like Wang Tianzong, adding Sword Emperor in front of it. How ridiculous is that? His Majesty is His Majesty, the only Majesty. The man's voice was low and a little gentle. Deity stopped laughing, and he stared at the screen in front of him. Is Lu Xianxia your man? He asked suddenly. This time, the one who pulled the strings was Lu Xianxia, the invincible Grand Master who was known as the Sword Sage in East Island and the leader of Jifeng Sword Raining School. This question? If it was a few days ago, I wouldn't be sure. But now, yes, he is my follower. The man on the screen smiled elegantly. The sword sage of East Island is your follower. Deity repeated and said with a slight sneer, "What a big deal. In my opinion, he is my follower, and he has no other identity." The man said softly, "If your majesty thinks that I have violated your territory, I can ask Wuxia and Xianxia to withdraw from East Island with the power of Jifeng's sword training school. I want to cooperate with you, so please believe in my sincerity. I am willing to compromise on some things." Deity sneered and said nothing. Wuxia and Xianxia withdrew from East Island. Deity naturally had no objection. In the current situation of East Island, Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Training School seemed to have bowed to the purgatory of Heaven Capital, but the internal game had never stopped. If Jifeng's Sword Training School withdrew, the purgatory of Heaven Capital could suppress Wuji Palace in the shortest time, unify the dark world of East Island, and hold the power of the entire special warfare system. But such an ending was not what the royals wanted to see. So even if Jifeng's Sword Training School wanted to withdraw, even if the Mikado knew that Wuxia and Xianxia had become the mysterious highness or his majesty's follower, the royals would not let Jifeng's Sword Training School and Wuxia and Xianxia leave. This was a necessary means to check and balance the purgatory of Heaven Capital. So what the other party said about withdrawing and sincerity were all bullsh*t. The man on the screen also gradually fell silent. After a long time, he said softly, "It seems that you can't fully trust me. Don't talk nonsense." Deity said blandly, "Get to the point." "The point?" The man on the screen said it silently and then laughed. "The point, of course, is Eastern Europe. Marshal Li, what do you think of the chaos in Eastern Europe?" "I can't see through it," Deity said blandly. The chaos in Eastern Europe would only get more and more chaotic, and it was far from clear. For now, no one could see through it. "Marshal Li can't see through it, but you're still involved, aren't you?" The man who claimed to be His Majesty said with a smile, "The purgatory of Heaven Capital is very strong. It has the support of the former experts of the Li family. It can be said that there are many experts inside. However, if possible, you still need the combat capability of the invincible realm, don't you? Wuxia and Xianxia is good, and so are the swordsmen of Jifeng Sword Training School. If Marshal Li needs them, you can take them with you on this trip to Eastern Europe. They can be used as dogs or cannon fodder. As for the things they get, whether they are interests or power, they can be handed over to the purgatory of Heaven Capital unconditionally. As for the interior of East Island, after the chaos in Eastern Europe is over, Jifeng's Sword Training School can also follow your lead. What do you think?" He laughed softly and said, "One more invincible realm lackey and more than a dozen more top swordsmen will still help Marshal Li in your plan to conquer Eastern Europe, won't it?" "What do you want?" Deity narrowed his eyes. "An invincible realm dog." These words were truly bold and courageous. The invincible realm was the top combat capability in the Dark World. Anything involving an invincible realm expert could be regarded as a major event in the Dark World. An invincible realm dog? In the Dark World, except for the person in front of him, even Deity himself did not dare to say so. And Wuxia and Xianxia was not the most ordinary invincible realm expert. He was the sword sage of East Island. "It's simple. It's just a life," the man said blandly. "Whose life?" Deity looked at the screen and said a cold joke, "Wang Tianzong." The other party's answer was colder than his cold joke. "Wang Tianzong has too many restrictions and is nothing to be afraid of. In some ways, Marshal Li, you have too many restrictions and are also nothing to be afraid of. I don't deny that you are powerful, but you are nothing to be afraid of. That's why I want to cooperate with you." "Who is that?" Deity looked at the screen and asked. The person on the screen hesitated and finally said, "Qin Weibai." "Marshal Li, as long as you kill Qin Weibai in Eastern Europe, you will be my firmest ally. This doesn't seem to conflict with your plan. You should want to kill Li Tianlan, don't you?" The man's tone was flat and slow. "I think of a joke. It's not very funny, but it's true. Many people in Zhongzhou State want to kill Li Tianlan. Wang Tianzong wants to kill him, Gu Xingyun wants to kill him, and a group of big shots in the Prince Group also want to kill him. I don't deny their wisdom, but in this matter, they behave like fools. This word is not elegant, but they are really stupid, simply stupid. They will never understand that if Qin Weibai doesn't die, they can't kill Li Tianlan. Marshal Li is wise, I think you should understand. Even if you don't understand, I tell you, and you should understand. Why should I believe you? Deity's tone was cold. Don't believe me. It doesn't matter. The man said with a smile, I just provide you with help, and at the same time ask you to help me kill Qin Weibai. As long as she dies, it doesn't matter whether you believe me or not. At that time, Li Tianlan will be easy to kill. Deity was indifferent and silent. Reason? After a long time, he asked softly. No reason. The man shook his head. 2 days ago, I was sure of something, so she must die. If there is a reason, she knows too much. Deity seemed to be making a choice. If you are worried about Lin Fengting, I can also provide some help. I have another follower who has just been crowned by the Pope. Although he is no match for Lin Fengting, he can restrain him for a short time. The man said with a smile. Except the Pope's coronation. Deity's body seemed to shake. Qin Weibai can completely trust the Lin clan. It can even be said that apart from Li Tianlan, the only one she can completely trust is the Lin clan. As for the reason, you can understand that the Lin clan accepted a disciple many years ago, but the past is gone with the wind, and it is no longer important. The only important thing is that Qin Weibai is also very important to the Lin clan. In the battlefield of Eastern Europe, my people can temporarily restrain Lin Fengting, but in the purgatory of Heaven Capital, they may be targeted by the Lin clan. You need to decide how to choose. The man said softly, if you are willing to cooperate with me, I can give everything that Jifeng's sword training school has obtained in this Eastern European chaos, and even a part of what the Vatican has obtained, to the purgatory of Heaven Capital without reservation. Is it worth it? Deity asked, narrowing his eyes. The gains of Jifeng's sword training school and a part of the Vatican were destined to be rich. And in this Eastern European chaos, only 2 people in the Vatican were crowned by the Pope, Arcis and the Vice-Marshal of the Holy Disarmament Corps. Arcis was impossible. The so-called follower could only be the Vice-Marshal of the Holy Disarmament Corps. It took a lot of effort for the other party to climb to that position. Once the other party gave a part of the Vatican's gains to the purgatory of Heaven Capital, it was equivalent to all their efforts in the Vatican being wasted. Just to kill Qin Weibai. Was it really worth it? It's worth it. The man said calmly, it's absolutely worth it. About this, His Highness. I really didn't dig a pit for the sake of digging a pit. This is a very important main line. It appeared in the outline before I started writing, and there are some clues in front. 8,500 chapters asking for monthly votes. Chapter 405. Late at night in midsummer. The empty night began to become gloomy in the second half of the night. The dark sky hung over West Lake, and the stars were hidden. The quiet West Lake was quiet in the light of Lin, like a frozen, dim, and blurry landscape painting. At a certain moment, the gloomy and depressing night suddenly lit up with a pale sky. The light illuminated the bustling landscape of Lin. The sky lit up for a moment, and then fell silent again. The next second, the roaring thunder broke the silence of heaven and earth. The heavy rain swept through the whole of Lin, and in an instant, time in the West Lake clubhouse was still flowing forward in luxury. West Lake was beautiful in the rain, but the waves of West Lake under the heavy rain were turbulent, with a vague violence that could devour everything in the magnificence. The night was getting darker and darker. There seemed to be only the heavy rain falling non-stop in the whole world. Deity was still sitting in the private room of the clubhouse. The laptop video had been turned off. The conversation had been over for a long time. Deity sat in the position where he was talking, motionless. He didn't know how long he had been silent. He had talked a lot with the mysterious His Majesty, but it seemed that he had talked very little. The other party was extremely shrewd, so from beginning to end, Deity never got any extra information. He only knew that the other party wanted to ask him to kill Qin Weibai. His attitude was very firm. It was the kind of determination that almost at all costs. Deity quietly thought about everything that had happened tonight. Not much happened tonight, but the aftertaste was extremely long. The flowers on Lonely Mountain, Li Honghe's attitude, the mysterious His Majesty, the two followers of the invincible realm, Qin Weibai, and the chaos in Eastern Europe. Everything seemed clear at a glance. But Deity had not completely figured out the subtle connection between them until now. This mysterious His Majesty knew a lot of things. Qin Weibai also knew a lot of things. But what did this His Majesty confirm recently that made him want to kill Qin Weibai? And who was he and what did he want? The second commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps of the Vatican was his follower. Lu Shengtangquan, the Sage of Sword of East Island, was his follower. In that case, could he have other disciples? The quality of his followers was extremely high, so high that Deity had to be serious. If the follower of the Vatican had the ability to restrain Lin Fengting after the coronation, it was enough to show that his strength was close to the peak of the invincible realm. Lu Shengtangquan's current strength was still far from the peak of the invincible realm. But now he was qualified to be listed on the divine list. Two disciples of the invincible realm, and both of them were invincible realm experts with the strength of the divine list. In recent decades, except for the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family at their peak, no force in the dark world could have such a luxurious lineup. What was more, the two invincible realm experts who could be listed on the divine list were just disciples. Or rather, they were lackeys. The invincible realm was the peak of the dark world. There were billions of people in the world, but how many of them could reach this level? There were a total of 30 people on the divine and holy lists, and there were a few who didn't have time to get on the list after they broke through the realm. There were only so many people. There were invincible realm experts who hid their names, but there were fewer of them than those who didn't get on the list, and they wouldn't affect the general trend. Every expert in the invincible realm, no matter strong or weak, was a strong-willed person. Regardless of whether they were noble or despicable, they all had their own dignity in their hearts. If these two disciples united and cooperated, with Jifeng Sword Raining School as the foundation, within a few years, it would be enough to establish a superpower in the dark world. It was as difficult as ascending to heaven to make such people their lackeys. How did His Majesty do it? And what was his ultimate purpose in doing all this? One question after another emerged in Deity's mind, and eventually became a mess. He subconsciously wanted to check Lu Shengtangquan and the Vice-Marshal of the Holy Disarmament Corps, but his intuition told him that it would basically be useless. He didn't agree to cooperate with His Majesty, nor did he refuse. This negotiation seemed to be useless, but some foundations had been laid. The night was getting darker. The heavy rain outside the club was getting wilder. All the lights in the West Lake Club were completely turned on. The bright light shone out in the night rain, bringing out a halo. The lights were intertwined in the rain curtain. In the deep night, there was an intertwined dreamy light, like a rainbow, beautiful. A low-key Volkswagen slowly entered the West Lake Club in the heavy rain. At 3 o'clock in the middle of the night, a figure passed through the rain curtain and walked into the box where Li Guangtu was. Li Guangtu was still silent and didn't seem to notice that someone had come in. But His Majesty had an appointment with him today, and he had an appointment with others here. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The figure in a black suit placed the black umbrella in his hand in the corner of the box and bowed slightly to Deity. His tone was respectful and his posture was serious, showing a very formal respect and deference. "Your Majesty?" Deity turned his head to look at the deeply bowed figure and laughed at himself. "What kind of majesty am I? I don't like this title. Your martial arts are unparalleled, and your sword intent is strong enough to compete with the Sword Emperor. Naturally, you deserve the title of His Majesty." The figure in the black suit slowly straightened up. He wasn't short, but he couldn't be considered burly. However, as he stood there, he gave off an extremely tough and straight feeling. His delicate and clean appearance wasn't particularly outstanding, but his temperament was extremely eye-catching. The corners of his mouth were gently pursed, and he looked resolute and cold, but his eyes were calm and indifferent. This was the face of a young man. 27 or 28 years old. A face that almost all the young masters in Zhongzhou State now knew. A face that even left a deep impression on the world in the final maneuver a few days ago. Jiang Shangyu's face. Deity looked at Jiang Shangyu calmly and narrowed his eyes slightly. Deity. Jiang Shangyu. This was a meeting that no one had expected, and it was also the first official meeting between the two. There was no appreciation in Deity's eyes, only a touch of satisfaction, as if he was looking at a chess piece that could be used. Jiang Shangyu's expression was very calm and respectful. It was hard to say whether he took the initiative to contact the Purgatory of Heaven capital, or the Purgatory of Heaven capital looked for him. In some seemingly accidental but actually inevitable coincidences, the two sides had a connection. The first time Jiang Shangyu did something for the Purgatory of Heaven capital was 2 years ago. No one knew this. Even Jiang Shan didn't know. You did well in the final maneuver. Deity looked at him for a while and said lightly, I am looking forward to your future. Jiang Shangyu hesitated, as if he didn't know how to address him. Finally, he said softly, You flatter me. It's not a compliment. Deity shook his head. What I like is your potential. If you tell me that you have no potential, it only proves that I have no vision. There is no need for modesty in the Purgatory of Heaven capital. If a capable person deliberately lowers his position, he is incompetent. You have determined your path to the invincible realm before you are 30 years old. Before you are 40 years old, you are expected to be invincible. In the future, you may be able to stand at the top of the divine list. Jiang Shangyu stood silently and did not speak. In the past 2 years, you have done a few things for the Purgatory of Heaven capital, and you have done a good job. The Jiang family is in a delicate position now. I can see the direction of your efforts. To some extent, there is no conflict between my direction and the Jiang families. And you and your family can play a big role in my chessboard. That's why I see you today. Deity looked at Jiang Shangyu's calm face and chuckled. His voice was very low, but because it was very real and clear, it sounded very loud in Jiang Shangyu's ears. Jiang Shangyu, would you like to join the Purgatory of Heaven capital? This question was not difficult to answer. If he was unwilling, Jiang Shangyu would not have come today. 2 years ago, he would not have contacted the people of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. So he nodded without hesitation and said with a smile, I am willing to be a chess piece in your Majesty's hands. He still called him Your Majesty. Deity did not say much, but said calmly, When I come to Zhongzhou State, there will be a place for the Jiang family beside me. Jiang Shangyu bent down deeply and bowed. In the future, you will contact me directly and be responsible for me. Deity continued. In the Purgatory of Heaven capital, it was a great honor to be able to contact Deity directly. This could be regarded as a reward. Okay. Jiang Shangyu responded respectfully, but a trace of hesitation flashed across his face. What's wrong? Deity raised his eyebrows. Something is wrong with Leng Yu. As Jiang Shangyu spoke, he looked up at Deity and said, Recently, she has little contact with me. Her state seems to be a little special. Purgatory of Heaven capital, Leng Yu. This was a secret name among the higher-ups of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. In the past 2 years, it was not Dawn Daybreak who had contact with Jiang Shangyu, but Leng Yu. It was the most convenient for her to contact Jiang Shangyu. However, Jiang Shangyu noticed that she seemed to be in trouble. Deity was silent for a while. It's okay. He thought for a moment and said, She can solve it herself. Jiang Shangyu nodded and asked, Does Your Majesty need me to go to Eastern Europe? Zhongzhou State has restarted the Snowdance Corps. If Your Majesty needs, I can operate myself into the Snowdance Corps. No need. Deity shook his head and personally poured a glass of red wine for Jiang Shangyu. The wine was good, but after a long time, the taste inevitably faded. How are your injuries? He asked. Jiang Shangyu's hand holding the wine glass paused, shook his head and said, It's not a big problem. I can recover in half a year. The main problem is the realm drop, but it's not serious. Now I'm still in the thundershocking realm. In the final maneuver, he, Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanshan, and Song Ci were seriously injured by Li Tianlan. Gu Hanshan, who had not dropped his realm, had the lightest injury. Wang Xianxia and Xianxia chose the most violent realm drop attack at the same time. They fell directly from the peak of the thunder-shocking realm to the peak of the fire-flaming realm. At this time, they were the most seriously injured. Jiang Shangyu also dropped his realm drop attack. But he stayed at the peak of the fire-flaming realm for 3 years. In the fire-flaming realm, he could not be more perfect. So his realm drop attack only made him drop back a small realm. Compared with before the final maneuver, his realm was still higher. As long as he recovered from his injury, it would not be a big problem. And now he had his own path. In the following time, he did not need a long closed-door training and silence. What he needed most was to stimulate his potential between life and death and broaden his road to the invincible realm. Then you go to Tianan. Deity said. Tianan. Jiang Shangyu repeated it, a little confused. East Emperor Palace will also go to Tianan. Deity's tone was calm. East Emperor Palace. Tianan. Jiang Shangyu's body suddenly shook. In an instant, the pattern of all the forces operating together in Tianan suddenly became clear in front of him. The members of East Emperor Palace connected with the major forces inside and outside Tianan. Just for a moment, Jiang Shangyu understood what Tianan meant to Li Tianlan. Tianan is great. Jiang Shangyu took a deep breath and muttered to himself. Deity did not speak. For him, East Emperor Palace was actually not important. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, he had to get that flower. If he wanted to get that flower, he had to get Li Tianlan's body. Once Li Tianlan died, East Emperor Palace would be meaningless to Tianan. However, if there was no East Emperor Palace in that place, it would still be the battlefield between the Purgatory of Heaven capital and the Wang family of Beihai in the future. At this time, if Jiang Shangyu, a hidden pawn, was buried there, it might play an unexpected role. And, in case Li Tianlan survived this time, Jiang Shangyu in Tianan could also become a key pawn for Deity and Li Tianlan to compete for the dominance of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. He was the supreme ruler of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. But the Purgatory of Heaven capital belonged to the Li family. During the years when the Li family collapsed, Deity did not know what the old man, who was good at playing chess, had planned. But the Purgatory of Heaven capital was definitely one of his biggest plans. The Purgatory of Heaven capital was very strong. Deity liked this plan very much. But the only thing he did not like was the position of some backbone forces of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Deity believed that those backbone forces were loyal enough to him. But the bad thing was that they were also loyal enough to Li Tianlan. What Li Honghe hoped most was that Deity and Li Tianlan could coordinate the power within the Purgatory of Heaven capital, and finally let Li Tianlan control the entire Purgatory of Heaven capital in Tianan, and then return to Zhongzhou state to restore the glory of the Li family. This required Deity to be willing to let go. But how could he be willing? If he was not willing, he had to struggle and rob. For Deity, if Li Tianlan died in Eastern Europe, there would be no hidden danger in the future of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. This was the best ending. But if the chaos in Eastern Europe could not be resolved as he wished, he would let Jiang Shangyu go now, and then it might play an unexpected role. Jiang Shangyu, Li Tianlan, Di Jiang. Deity looked at Jiang Shangyu thoughtfully. Among the three, if the latter two were at the same level, then Jiang Shangyu was undoubtedly too weak. Deity's eyes were a little hesitant. In his mind, Li Tianlan, Wang Xingxiao, Jiang Shangyu, Gu Hanshan, Song Ci, and Dongqing Rushi were undoubtedly the most promising young people in Zhongzhou state. And this was also the most correct order of strength in his mind. Li Tianlan was very strong. But Deity did not think that he deserved the glory of the Li family in the past. He could not win over Wang Xingxiao and Song Ci. As for Gu Hanshan, Deity had no prejudice against Gu Hanshan. He just correctly thought that all the people in Kunlun City were worthless clowns. He did not bother to target anyone. To put it simply, he simply looked down on them. The halo of Gu Hanshan's heavenly king heart was indeed dazzling enough. But in Deity's view, he was not even as good as Jiang Shangyu, who had a poor foundation. Dongcheng Rushi was in a special state. In this way, among the most outstanding young people in Zhengzhou State, the only one he could cultivate was Jiang Shangyu. Whether he was to use him to fight against Li Tianlan, Di Jiang, or Wang Shengxiao in the future, Jiang Shangyu seemed to be a little unqualified. His talent was outstanding enough, but in martial arts, pure talent and physique could not determine everything. Jiang Shangyu was not as good as Wang Shengxiao now. The most important thing was that the Jiang family did not have the martial arts inheritance and martial arts concept that had been accumulated for hundreds of years and was infinitely close to perfection. There was silence in the box. In the somewhat depressing atmosphere, Jiang Shangyu blinked, chuckled, and asked in confusion, "Your Majesty? Would you like to learn swordsmanship from me?" Deity suddenly said. The immortality seal of the purgatory of Heaven Capital was famous in the dark world. Everyone knew that Deity's weapon was a huge and somewhat exaggerated death scythe. But whether it was the immortality seal or the death scythe, what broke out in the end was sword intent. Only sword intent. It was based on the Li family's 24 moves of sword and became more subtle. It was Deity's invincible path. Jiang Shangyu froze for a moment. His face showed shock little by little, and finally became ecstatic. "Your Majesty," his voice trembled a little. Before coming here today, he never thought that he would have such an opportunity. He had his own invincible path. If he had Deity's guidance, you don't want to? Deity asked with a smile. They do. Jiang Shangyu's expression trembled. He didn't seem to know what to say, so he could only bow deeply. "Do you know why I chose you?" Deity looked at Jiang Shangyu. His eyes were not soft, but calm. "Not only because you are my only choice at the moment, but also because you are ambitious, but you are very clear-headed. Your family is also very clear-headed." It took the Jiang family several generations to climb up generation by generation. It's not easy to get to where it is today. You know what your status means today, and you know the consequences of losing it in your heart. This is the awe in your heart. So you have a request, but it's not a big one. In my opinion, this is stability. I like people who are stable. So, again, I look forward to your future in the purgatory of Heaven Capital. Jiang Shangyu bowed deeply and didn't get up for a long time. Deity reached out his hand. There was sword intent in the air. The sword intent was condensed and heavy. The air in the entire box seemed to solidify. Deity's fingers slid in the air. A faintly discernible line was drawn in the transparent air by the sword intent. Imprinting words and pictures in the void with sword intent was by no means an ordinary means of the invincible realm. When Jiang Shangyu raised his head, Deity had already carved a giant tree in the air with sword intent. The giant tree was full of leaves and transparent, but it was faintly shining in the air. The sword energy was extremely dazzling. "In my eyes, martial arts is a tree." Decisively and calmly, Deity taught Jiang Shangyu the first lesson. The root of the tree is the starting point of martial arts and the foundation. The deeper the root is under the ground, the bigger the tree will be. The 4 realms of martial arts are the trunk, chi-controlling realm, ice-condensing realm, fire-flaming realm, and thunder-shocking realm. The more accumulated, the thicker the trunk will be. In a sense, it can affect the final achievement. Deity looked at the leafy tree in the air. Above the trunk is the canopy. The martial path is very big, and this tree is also very big, so the canopy is very luxuriant. Thousands of branches form the canopy, so in my heart, the canopy is the path, and each branch is a different path. Look at this tree. Deity's tone was focused and calm. The trunk is the 4 realms of martial arts, and these different branches represent different heights. The thunder-shocking realm, the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, the half-step invincible realm, the worst invincible realm, the ordinary invincible realm, the slightly worse invincible realm, the stronger invincible realm, the normal invincible realm, the strong invincible realm, the peak of the invincible realm. The road is chosen by oneself. Deity said, each branch that forms the canopy grows upward at the beginning, but for various reasons, in the end, the branches will fall down. Only a few of them can always go up. This is the right way. So in the dark world, most of the half-step invincible realm experts can't enter the real invincible realm. The road has length, and so does the branch. The final height of the branch also means the strength after entering the invincible realm. Here, deity reached out and pointed. He pointed to the highest point in the book. Looking along his finger, Jiang Shangyu didn't know whether he was pointing at a leaf or a branch, but he was indeed the highest point. There is a saying about the Chosen One in the dark world. The Chosen One stands in the highest position and has absolute combat capability and dominance. If the Chosen One really exists, this is the position of the Chosen One. He waved his hand. The air began to fluctuate silently. The lush canopy began to disappear in large swaths. The drooping branches were gone, and the branches that grew horizontally were also disappearing. The branches that were going up but not high enough were also disappearing. In the blink of an eye, only a few tallest branches were left flickering in the air. Deity looked at the picture he had created. His eyes were a little complicated. Jiang Shangyu counted the branches. It was easy to count the branches, for 2 of them were in the highest position, and it was hard to tell which one was higher. The other 2 had a difference in height, but it was very small, and they were also in the position closest to the highest. I don't know much about martial arts. I know a little about the 24 moves of sword. Because of the relationship between the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai, I also know a little about the 6 paths of reincarnation. Deity calmly pointed to the lowest of the 4 branches. If the Chosen One is at the top, then I should be in this position. Starting from the root, all the way up, this is my path and my current position. The branch that represented his path was really high. It was very close to the top 2 branches that were level with each other. It was even closer to another branch. Jiang Shangyu seemed to feel a little strange. He looked at another branch. The branch that was a little higher than deity and a little lower than the top 2 branches. That is, he asked, that is Wang Tianzong's position. Deity calmly said, our paths are different. My path is truth and darkness. Wang Tianzong's path is illusion and light. There is no difference between the 2 paths. If I hadn't been injured, I could have reached Wang Tianzong's height. What he said could not be considered absolute authority, but it was more credible than most people's. Jiang Shangyu stared at a few branches. His eyes fell on the top 2 branches, and he was thinking about deity's words. The real night. The illusory day. It was extremely pure. So their sword intent would be pure, pure enough to tear everything. Wang Tianzong. Deity. This was already the peak of this era in the dark world. What kind of demeanor does a heaven's favorite have? If the top 2 branches are the Chosen One, can the Chosen One walk side by side? Jiang Shangyu asked. That's not the Chosen One. It's just the position that the Chosen One should be in. That's the end of martial arts. I think I can't get there, so I chose my current path. Wang Tianzong also thinks he can't get there, so he chose his own path. What you mean are 2 different but somewhat similar paths of the Chosen One. What kind of path? Jiang Shangyu asked seriously. You've seen it. Deity said, in the final maneuver, the forever silent world vaguely had the embryonic form of the Chosen One's path. Li Tianlan's current sword intent represents a path of the Chosen One. Reality and illusion. Deity's path was real and dark. Wang Tianzong's path was illusion and light. The combination of reality and illusion was the real path of the Chosen One. Jiang Shangyu suddenly fell silent. He already knew the other path. He smiled bitterly. After a moment of silence, he still asked, in addition to Li Tianlan's path, the other path of the Chosen One? Darkness and light, of course. Deity said calmly, it's also day and night. The heavy rain passed through the night and fell in the morning. The rain lessened a little. Deity had left for a long time. Jiang Shangyu sat in the position where Deity had sat all night, looking up at the tree that still existed in the air. The sword intent left by Deity was very faint. The tree also faded a lot. Jiang Shangyu looked at it quietly. His eyes were obscure, with one or countless emotions that were hard to understand. Illusion and light. Reality and darkness. Both could lead to the strongest peak of the invincible realm. Illusion and reality. Day and night. It was the path of the chosen one. Jiang Shangyu closed his eyes silently. The sword stroke of Li Tianlan in the final maneuver reappeared in his mind. The sword was not a sword. It was just a green leaf. But the green leaf was also a sword. Everything was a sword. The green leaf drifted in the domain of nothingness. The world quieted down, shrank, and fell into silence. Mountains, rivers, lakes, seas, cities, tall buildings, everything seemed to disappear completely, become false, and become nothingness. The green leaf drifted, neither fast nor slow. It smashed Gu Hanshan's ninth secluded impasse, Wang Xingxiao's and Song Si's sword light, and his starry sky. The sword intent was still condensed and did not dissipate. It was so real that it seemed to crush everyone's will. Reality and illusion. Reality and illusion. Jiang Shangyu suddenly opened his eyes. Cold sweat had seeped out of his forehead. The cold sweat flowed down his face and fell on his clothes. Jiang Shangyu suddenly burst out laughing. His eyes were distorted, his face ferocious, and his laughter was sad and desperate. The tree in the air was still flashing. No one knew that Jiang Shangyu was not desperate because of Li Tianlan's sword stroke. It was because of something else. Something else. He laughed for a long time, bent over on the sofa, and finally knelt on the ground. He laughed so hard that he could not stand up straight. After a long time, he slowly stood up with his hand on the wall. His fingers touched the button on the wall. Soft music began to play, surrounding the private room. Jiang Shangyu sat back on the sofa, reached out to pour himself a glass of wine, and drank it silently. The wine was good, but it tasted bad. He did not like red wine, and he had never liked it. The tree in the air disappeared. Jiang Shangyu drank the wine in big gulps. His eyes were a little blurred and he seemed to be drunk. But his heart was calm. He saw the end of martial arts that deity showed him, saw deity's path, and even got deity's sword intent. He needed these very much. But they were not his after all. He had his own path. Jiang Shangyu took a deep breath and thought about Tiannan. He learned swordsmanship from deity. Deity was his teacher. His teacher wanted him to go to Tiannan, maybe to guard against Di Jiang or against Li Tianlan. But until deity left, he did not tell deity about his cooperation with Li Tianlan. Jiang Shangyu finished drinking the red wine, lay on the sofa, and looked at the ceiling with dull eyes. He needed deity's martial arts. But he really did not like to let deity be his teacher. He also did not like the swords of the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai. If he and deity were born in the same era, he firmly believed that he had the capital to compete with deity. Jiang Shangyu's eyes were dull, and he laughed again. No one knew whether it was a sneer or a drunken laugh. In the hazy and soft music, his drunken murmur was suppressed. I hate God for taking 20 years from me. Mount Dibing. It was drizzling. Beihai province was close to the sea. There was a lot of rain and snow, but it rarely rained heavily. It was often drizzling and raining. The rain began a few days ago and gradually slowed down, but it never stopped. It went through several nights and mornings. According to the weather station, it seemed to last until tomorrow night. In the rainy sky in the early morning, a black Mercedes-Benz slowly drove to the top of Mount Dibing after passing several checkpoints. The Mercedes-Benz came directly to the Emperor Hall where Wang Tianzong usually lived. At 5 o'clock in the morning. At this time, Wang Tianzong should not have gotten up yet. The door of the Mercedes-Benz opened. Xian Ming, the chief intelligence officer of the Wang family of Beihai, who had disappeared for a period of time on Mount Dibing, pushed the door and got out of the car with a tired face. At the same time, a middle-aged man about 50 years old followed him out of the car. The middle-aged man was slightly plump, wore a pair of glasses, and was dressed very well. He looked like a successful person who had achieved success and recognition. However, at this time, he stood beside Xian Ming and looked at the bustling Mount Dibing around, but he seemed a little timid, so that he was somewhat out of tune with the atmosphere on Mount Dibing. Xian Ming did not care about this. He looked at the closed door of the Emperor Hall, hesitated, and stepped forward to press the doorbell. At the same time, he raised his voice and said, "Your Majesty, Xian Ming wants to see you." His voice was clear and powerful. It passed through the door and resounded in the Emperor Hall. The Emperor Hall was silent for a moment, and the bedroom on the second floor lit up. "What's the matter?" Wang Tianzong's steady voice sounded. "I found something, and I need your Majesty to look at it immediately." Xian Ming's expression was strange. Thinking of the news, his eyes looked as if he had seen a ghost. "It's about Qin Weibai." A few days ago, Wang Tianzong asked him to investigate Qin Weibai at all costs. Xian Ming already had the news. It was not fast, but the object of the investigation was the mysterious Qin Weibai. So the speed of getting the news was not slow. But Xian Ming was not sure whether his investigation was going well. The result of this investigation was simply the weirdest information he had ever received in his life. Xian Ming himself could not even explain some things. But he must send these things to Wang Tianzong as soon as possible. The door of the Emperor Hall opened slowly. Wang Tianzong, still in pajamas, appeared at the door, looking calm. He looked at Xian Ming, who was travel-worn and bloodshot. His eyes softened a little and he nodded. "Who is this?" His eyes fell on the middle-aged man behind Xian Ming, with some doubts. "In the investigation of Qin Weibai, this is a very key figure," Xian Ming said. Wang Tianzong said yes and waved his hand. "Come in and talk." Xian Ming nodded and looked back at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man held a bag tightly in his hand. Xian Ming's eyes fell on the bag first. In an instant, that strange and inexplicable feeling emerged in his heart again. A refreshing morning breeze blew in front of the Emperor Hall. Xian Ming's body trembled, and he suddenly felt that the midsummer morning was very cold. There should be one more chapter before I enter Eastern Europe. I often write things from the perspective of the protagonist. This is a bad habit. But in the environment of special warfare, before the protagonist plays an important role, God and the Sword Emperor can actually represent the main line. But it should not be like this next time. 8,500 word chapters, you know. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.